Hello there, and welcome to episode 7 of Battle of the Pilots. I am Graham Raddings, and I am joined by my good friend and quantum vacuum tube appreciator, Adrian Mills. In this podcast, we reach into the extensive back catalogue of TV shows from over the last 50 years and pluck out a couple of pilot episodes for a head-to-head battle. To ensure we can crown a champion, we will take an awkward, surreptitious and frothy look at both chosen TV show pilot episodes, discussing their relative merits or demerits, and scoring them out of 10 for selected key themes and or categories such as story, characters, costumes, music, visuals, and influence, to eventually settle on an overall score. In the end, one pilot show will emerge as top of the cops, while the other will be getting their asses chewed off downtown by the mayor. For this 7th episode, we have chosen 2 high-octane action cop shows from the brightly lit lawless land of 80s TV. Yes, you've guessed it. This week, the erstwhile stuntable toupee of TJ Hooker goes cop badge to Sergeant Shield with the budget wannabe Dirty Harry antics of Hunter. Let battle commence.
Battle indeed. Battle indeed. Well,
I know it's going to be quite an interesting one, this. Now, as is the way with these things, obviously we like to start proceedings off with Adrian giving us the kind of just the basic rundown, the top of the tree, the kind of top of the list stuff about either of these 2 shows. What are these shows even about for the people that weren't even around at this time?
well, yes, I can do that. The pilot summaries for TJ Hooker and for Hunter. So TJ Hooker first. TJ Hooker, an American police drama television program starring William Shatner in the title role as a 15-year veteran police sergeant. The series premiered as a mid-season replacement on March 13th, 1982 on ABC and ran on the network until May 4th, 1985. The show was then picked up for a further single season by CBS.
Strange.
Before ultimately meeting its demise. I couldn't actually find out what it was replacing either, but, there you go. These kind of things are just lost to the mist of time. Some program was crap and not doing very well, so they rolled out the shat.
Yeah, the shat on it.
Quite literally. Hunter, however, is an American crime drama television series created by Frank Lupo that ran on NBC from September 18th, 1984 to April 26th, 1991.
Aye.
7 years of this. It starred Fred Dreyer as Sergeant Rick Hunter and Stephanie Kramer as Sergeant Dee Dee McCall. Good Lord. And Charles Hallahan as Captain Charles Charlie Devane. The title character, Sergeant Rick Hunter, is a wily, physically imposing, often rule-breaking homicide detective with the Los Angeles Police Department.
Aren't
we had that
always?
description before.
Yeah. It's eerily familiar kind of description, really, actually, I think we'll come to find.
Yeah. But there you go.
Have you enjoyed watching these pilot episodes just before we get stuck into the meat of all of this?
I enjoyed one more than the other.
And should I ask you a question? Did you used to watch either or both back in the 80s, of course? Because that's the key question, isn't it? Were these shows of our youth?
Yeah, TJ Hooker, yes. Or, let's just get the thing out of the way, as it was referred to by Redford, I think, at one point, TJ Rocket.
Good old Redford.
Coming up next on ITV, it's TJ Rocket.
TJ Rocket. Where did you get that from?
I don't know. God knows. But I used to remember watching that. Hunter was a weirder one because I think Hunter was on later, wasn't it? I seem to remember
it was on ITV, yeah.
Yeah, I think, but I don't think it was in prime time, was it? I think it was a late. It was like 10:30 on a Friday or something. I seem to remember it being something you caught late on in the evening.
Well, it's funny you say that. I couldn't remember. I had a feeling it's because I think he got moved around, and I think it got moved around for reasons we'll come into.
Yeah, I sort of put it in the same bracket as do you remember Highwayman?
All right, Highway. Unfortunately, yeah, I do remember it, yeah.
I seem to think Hunter was in that bracket. And weirdly, I don't know if I saw, well, obviously, I'm sure you're probably going to mention it, but Sledgehammer. I think I saw Sledgehammer before I saw Hunter.
No, funnily enough, yes, I will mention Sledgehammer a bit, but I actually saw Sledgehammer after I'd seen Hunter. But there's no accident that these things appeared when they did, I think it's safe to say.
No. But I'm definitely was more aware, I think, of Sledgehammer than when I saw Hunter.
Yeah, makes sense.
But TJ Hooker definitely was I was on Saturday nights, I think, if I remember rightly, Friday or Saturday nights, and it was
prime time, I think.
It was a good show. It was a show I used to enjoy watching.
Was it on? But they're both on ITV in the UK, or was?
I believe
Hunter
so.
Definitely was.
Yeah, Hunter was, and TJ Hooker was. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, for this episode, then, we're going to look at the story and characters, the costumes and sets, the music, sound effects, the cinematography, and/or special effects. More when the special effects in this one's slightly different because it's cop shows and stuff. And then the reception and influence, of course. And that will ultimately then, once we scored them, when we go through our special matrix of scores and we battle each one out with a series of interchanged arguments about which cop we think is the greatest, and it's not going to take long to argue that, I don't think, we will then, of course, come up with a final answer to our question, which is, of course, which will win the Battle of the Pilots. So without further ado, Adrian, maybe it's time we went into the first item. And for this one, it's all about the story and characters, and it's over to you to tell us what happens in the pilot of TJ Hooker.
Well, Graham, let me tell you. There's a fresh batch of recruits at LCPD. Because LCP, this is setting a fictional town in California, or a place, that's where it is.
Okay.
Although I did read that this is actually Los Angeles County Police Department. I don't know, whatever it is, it's LCPD. So there's fresh batch of recruits at LCPD Academy, and they're being welcomed into the fold by none other than TJ Hooker himself.
Oh.
And what does the TJ stand for? Don't ask, because his first name is Sergeant. Okay.
I forgot you said that.
If you want to know, though, it stands for Thomas Jefferson, because of course it would. It had to be an American president. Of course it would. James Tiberius, Thomas Jefferson. There's links. Anyway, TJ Rocket is played by none other than the Shat himself. That's William Shatner. Now, obviously, I don't need to say what William Shatner's famous for. Star Trek, the role of Captain, Admiral, or Commander James T. Kirk. But he's starred in loads of things. When you look through his IMDb list, there's just loads.
Oh yeah, loads of stuff.
But his other big show, and the one that he starred in most, was actually over 100 episodes of Boston Legal.
Okay, it's not one I'm very familiar with.
No, it's a courtroom drama. I think it's well regarded. James Spader's in it as well, I think. But I believe that was it's over 100 episodes of that he was in. I never watched it myself, but I understand from people that had that it was very good. Anyway, our raw recruits at the LCPD Academy are made up of McNeil. He's played by Richard Lawson, not our old friend, who you probably recognise as one of the ghost hunters from Poltergeist.
I thought I'd seen him around.
Yeah, you've got Romano. He's played by Adrian Zemed's hair, who you probably recognise from Grease 2. Or Bachelor Party.
Oh, Bachelor Party. It's been driving me crazy. Thank you.
Bachelor Party, yeah. There's Canfield. These are the main ones. There's others. There's a group of them. There's Canfield, who's played by Brian Clark. He was in General Hospital and The Bold and the Beautiful. So, and there's Sanders as well, who's played by Joe McDonnell. You may have seen them in The Munster's Revenge or something.
I wouldn't have seen that. Can I show you that?
No. And there's Country. We don't know their name. They're just referred to as Country. Even in the credits, they're just referred to as Country. Because he's got a country accent.
Yeah, he comes from the country.
He's played by Steve Hanks, and he was in nothing that I recognised. But he was in a film called Mega Shark versus Mecha Shark. Anyway.
The shark is.
These are our main recruits. And we've got to follow through this episode under the watchful and very conservative eye of TJ Hooker himself.
Just a bit.
So after a bit of a pep talk, where Hooker outlines his worldview that society is too weak on the perps on the streets, and he wants to weed out any airheads and marshmallows. Okay. It's like, okay, go TJ, set them up. Following this, we join our male recruits into the changing room, where Romano takes no time in showing off his monogrammed budgie smugglers.
Bit for the ladies, that wasn't it at the time?
just stood there, and everyone's like, "Hey, look at these!" And he's like, "Oh, you're talking about my pants?"
And everyone was everyone was grateful that it wasn't the Shat that did that. For goodness' sake,
yeah.
He just walks in his budgie smugglers. Everyone's like,
He's Shat hugglers.
He's showing off his TJs. Now we know what it stands for.
Tiny Johnson. Oh, anyway, he then takes a shine to Canfield's wife, who he sees in a picture. He's like, oh, and we get a really awkward zoom. It's like an out of focus zoom.
It's really
bad. But this segues us very smoothly into a restaurant scene where the ADR is off the charts. Those voices were not recorded in that environment.
No, they weren't.
They were not. It's like, oh, good Lord, they're very clear. Anyway, here we meet Canfield's wife, Lacey. Now, she's played by Deborah Shelton. Interestingly, she won Miss USA in 1970.
You can see why.
Yeah, and came second in Miss Universe in the same year. She also played Mandy Winger in several seasons of Dallas. But you may recognise her and remember her as the woman who gets violently killed with a massive drill in Brian De Palma's Body Double.
Thank you. The second saviour. They dragged me up the wall. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of that in this episode of this. There's going to be quite a few revelations of character.
Yeah. She's meeting with an ex who seems to be, it's her boss. And I think she's sort of telling him that it's over. But don't worry about it, because this subplot goes nowhere. You can just forget about it. It's the subplot
all about.
It just goes nowhere. It doesn't really matter. Just forget about this. Who cares?
Pointless.
Anyway, then we're back at the academy where Hooker yells slogans at the recruits. It's just like, come on, no pain without gain. Come on, get on with it.
The crappiest training ever seen.
Yeah. So as they clamber over a wall in order to shoot someone in a crouched position, subtly, we then switch to a massive close-up of a gun being loaded. And we met our bad guys for this episode, who are, there's Wit, who's played by Timothy Scott. He's a regular of loads of TV shows at the time.
Yeah,
he's just sort of one of those kind of characters. He did loads of westerns and stuff because he looks like one. He lives with his wife, she is simply characterised by looking after a squalling baby, and she wants him to get a job. But a manual job is no good for him. So
and she fakes an accent as well. She fakes her accent for some reason.
I know.
It's really weird.
He has off the charts in this part as well. He heads out with Travis. He's played by Carl Crudup, another veteran of single episode appearances in loads of shows around that time. This is just people who pop up in the odd show. Back at the training ground, an off-screen loudspeaker plays a recording of Hooker yelling more slogans at the recruits, because you don't see him at this point. Because he's just got it on a tape in the background. Just put that on. That'll shut him. Come on, no pain without gain. Come on, run faster. They run through tyres. Before Romano takes a break to admire Sanders. Sanders is a woman. He just basically stops to admire her ass.
Oh, she's doing burpees. Yeah, he does.
Yeah, but she tells him to buzz off. Yeah, buzz off, Romano. He's like, hey.
You fly.
Yeah. We can tell Romano is in full heat here as his hair has risen to ridiculous heights. It's like he's gone full plumage. It's some full animal-like plumage display. It's, Anyway. Still, this is noticed by Hooker, who sends them off to do 5 laps, probably to cool them down, but not without a slogan of encouragement on their way. He just has to shout something. We then cut to the shooting range, and Hooker explains that you must shoot first in order to survive, and that you must be shooting to kill. There's no attempt at wounding, just shoot to kill.
Strange.
Yeah, back with our perps, Whit and Travis, they talk about getting respect before they see a couple of rich-looking types leaving a restaurant. Travis, at this point, seems to have forgotten what they're out to do. You can say, look at those two. He's like, yeah, and?
It's
let's go get them. Oh, yeah, let's do that.
We're robbers.
we're robbers, yeah, that's it. We're criminals. So Whit reminds him, and they mug them at gunpoint. The couple only have $17, so they shoot them both dead. It's quite brutal, this bit.
It's quite brutal, actually, that.
Yeah, they make a dark joke as they leave, saying, something about, they only had $17. They don't even check them. It's like they don't even check them to leave anything more. I don't know, anyway. But it's quite brutal, that bit. They just head back to the car and drive off.
You don't even wait for the jewellery.
Back at the academy. No, exactly.
He demands jewellery and then don't ask for it.
I know. It's like just to shoot them. Anyway, we're back at the academy and in the classroom, and Hooker tells the story of how someone was arrested but got out on a technicality before going on to shoot 2 people before he got out. That's it. There's no discussion. It's just this story.
End of lesson.
I think he asked a couple of questions. He goes, "What were they? What did they get sent down for?" You're well done, but they got out and then they killed 2 people. Cut.
Yeah. End scene.
End scene. And we're back to the shooting range, seeing the recruits blasting the crap out of targets. Then we're getting them to jump over a fence. Then we're back to the shooting range where they're now blasting shotguns. I was expecting to cut to something else and then back with cannons or bazookas or something. But it doesn't. This is not subtle in its messaging at this point. No,
it's not.
Okay. As a cool down, after all this, testosterone stuff, we head to the bar for an awkward 2-layer deep section at the bar.
Scene.
They just stood behind. Just go round, get a table.
It's really
7
weird.
of you.
It's really weird.
And it's just like talking. Hooker's just holding court, basically. He's bemoaning the legalities and due process that just get in the way of shooting people. And why can't things be like they used to be? He's just completely moaning. I'll come to a bit about that in a minute. After he leaves, Lawson's wife questions Hooker's views, But more importantly, Romano manages to get Sanders to dance with him in what can only be described as dancing that clearly inspired Van Damme in Kickboxer.
Oh,
quite honestly, I'm not sure what he's thinking there. That dancing is off the chart. It's just crazy.
He ain't impressing no one with that.
Well, he does the splits in a bar with 6 other people dancing. It's very strange.
This
hour. Anyway, then we cut to see Cranfield. He's on the phone back to his wife. It seems that these two are in debt, but it never comes to anything.
No.
She mentions being in debt. He's on his wife. There's a little bit of casual anti-Semitism. And then, and then she's in bed at home in a really gratuitous cleavage shot that's there for no reason. She's just in bed
it's there
naked
for a reason.
with the covers pulled up just above her nipples. It's like, what's the... Now, I thought at this point it was going to reveal that she was in bed with her boss.
Yeah, I did.
Because he keeps saying like, "Oh, I tried ringing you. I was at work. Oh, I tried ringing you. I was work probably. Yeah, blah blah blah." But doesn't. It goes nowhere. He just hangs up and the scene ends. It's very strange. It's like, what is this subplot? Anyway, Hooker heads back to his old house where his ex-wife is waiting impatiently to go out with their new fella because he's supposed to be looking after the kids. And here we find out that Hooker, he's at the academy because he was shot on duty and he could have retired afterwards. But as she tells him, he likes living on the edge.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I don't think he's living on the edge much in an academy.
Not in this, but no.
No. So then it cuts to our bad guys. They're back at it. We see them follow a couple of well-dressed gentlemen into a parking lot and it cuts away. Back with Hooker. The recruits, it jumps around a lot, this show. The recruits ring him up. There's just all of them in a hallway, just ringing him up at home.
On a payphone.
Yeah, on a payphone. They're like, "Oh, we want to do stuff."
It's really weird.
And it's like, why? It's like, why? What's happening? Because it's all falling apart, Hooker. There's a sniper shooting people. There's riots over here. There's 2 people who have been killed in a parking lot. That's the 2 we've just seen. It's just getting worse. Streets are no longer safe. And that's it. So he goes, "Right, okay. 7 o'clock in the morning, you can head out." It's like, who made that decision? He's not the boss. He's just a sergeant. He's a training sergeant.
Why ring him at home?
I don't know. Why not wait till the next day? Anyhow, we then get a short sequence of some bits where, basically our recruits are now let out and they get a call to a murder, but they're late to it. Basically, it seems this old woman has shot one of some robbers in the store. And there's this whole sequence where they're told by her how things have gotten worse. The streets are no longer safe. And in the past, it was something of a golden age where, they knew the police on the beat and there was loads of them and it was all fine. You could leave your door open, all that kind of stuff. And so the kind of, I think it's Canfield at this point. I'm not quite sure which one it is at this point who's with her. They're like, he's like, yeah, well, we'll get stuff back as it was. Yeah, don't worry. She's shot someone though. I don't think she's ever arrested. just cuts away. We then cut to McNeil, Lawson, and Hooker, who basically stop a driver for doing something wrong. And there's a weird sequence where they sort of talking to him, and then a woman just comes running out of a building screaming that someone's shooting.
She does.
It turns out to be the sniper that we had mentioned of earlier. He's firing from a nearby roof. So Hooker, Romano, and McNeil go off to deal with this. Romano and McNeil go up the side of the building, whilst Hooker engages from inside. He goes up the stairs. On the way up, Romano has a Nam flashback.
Out of the blue.
just causing him to freeze for a moment. He's been in Nam. Who knew? On top of the roof. It cuts to Hooker, but I say Hooker, it's a svelte stuntman jumping over a gap and then rolling. Turns back into Hooker, who gets the sniper's attention before 2 more stuntmen grapple with him and detain him before turning into Romano and McNeil. Those stuntmen they've got for Romano and McNeil made me howl. There was nothing like it. The one who looks McNeil is like, that's not McNeil. They're in shot. Ain't him. They're in full shot for like 5 seconds. It's like,
so
who's they?
Stupid.
Where did they come from? Romano goes full on anger mode at this point because he's denoted this by his wild hair. Romano's moods are denoted by his hair. So whether he's in heat or anger, it just goes, his hair denotes it. That's what I said by this, Romano is played by Adrian Smed's hair with just him underneath it. And he's pulled off the perp by Hooker, who looks worried about him. He's like, ooh, okay. Back to our main crims, though, Whit and Travis. They're having a nice burger meal and planning their next jobs. And the burger joint that they're in they're going to rob it next Saturday. okay, because that's when they take the take-ins or something. Hooker, going back to his ex's place, tells he's worried about Romano and then likens the streets to Nam. I don't think they are. It's not. They're not really. It's not like that. To placate him, though, she tells him it's okay and invites him to stay the night, which raises more than Hooker's eyebrows.
Oh,
indeed. Out on patrol, veteran cop Brian, we've seen him earlier with the earlier bit. He's with McNeil and Country at this point. They stop so Brian can use the toilet. And Country, being the helpful guy he is, tries to help someone with their car. Turns out, though, it's Whit, the bad guy, who just shoots him point blank and then wounds McNeil. McNeil recovers from that really quickly.
Yeah, he does.
When Brian comes out, he's like, oh, he's over there. Go, he's out. It's all right, though. Check on him. I'm fine. You've been shot, man. But the Whit speeds off and Brian comes running out, wondering what the hell is going on. I just went to the toilet and my 2 recruits are dead. Oh, Chief's got to have my ass. Country's killed out. McNeil is wounded. And at the hospital, tensions are high. Hooker is angry. But as he leaves, he sees Lacey in the car with their boss. Again, this subplot goes nowhere, so forget about it. It's just nothing. Out on patrol, Hooker and English, one of the other recruits, end up chasing a perp. But when it comes down to it, English cannot shoot the perp, and Hooker gets shot instead. Turns out, though, that it was just a training exercise. And English, who comes from a long line of cops, is advised to leave the force, which he does. He doesn't because he doesn't have what it takes to shoot to kill someone. And he's therefore useless.
It's really bizarre, that whole sequence.
That whole sequence is really odd. What's he saying? Is you better make the choice for I have to make it for you. It's like, oh,
yeah,
right, okay.
It just sets all that up to get rid of him. It just seems very elaborate.
Yeah, it's very elaborate. We then get a couple of padding scenes before we get a domestic disturbance, which sees Hooker and Canfield turn up at Whit's house. Dun, dun, dun. As Whit stands at the door telling him everything is okay, he holds the door frame with one hand, the door with the other, and then reaches for his gun in the back of his jeans with his secret third hand.
You don't want to know what that is.
No, he's like, what's he holding onto the door with? With nothing to do, because they can't. The wife comes out and says, no, everything's fine. Whatever. They leave and we head for the big ending. It's Saturday, and the recruits, Hooker and their families, are having a day out at the park. Talk, as it does normally at these kind of things, turns to Vietnam.
For reasons.
So it's just like, some light banter around the families. What were you doing in Nam? Oh, I'd rather not talk about it. It's a bit depressing.
Good.
As they eat their chicken and then play some touch football before we see Whit and Travis head out to take out the burger joint, sorry. Lacey comes over to talk to Hooker about what happened outside the hospital, but this is resolved because this subplot goes nowhere.
It really doesn't.
That's it. That's the end of that subplot. She goes, you don't like me? Because no, but he needs to be thinking about what he's doing on the street rather than where you are or something like that. And she's like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Lacey and Kelly, another one of the wives, head off to get more fried chicken from the burger place. And our main plots suddenly come together as Whit and Travis enter the chicken joint and start holding up the place where Kelly and Lacey have just gone to, across the road from where they're having the party in the park. They shoot one of the workers. No blood anywhere. And they threaten Lacey and Kelly with threats of kidnap and worse, which is quite grim, before stealing the money. Gruesome. Yeah, and attempting to leave. At the sound of the gunshot, Hooker and the recruits come running over. They've all got their guns in the back of the cars. Hooker's got a massive gun.
Yeah, I think he's a big box.
I think he's compensating for his TJ. and Travis is shot. They go running over. Travis and Whit pile out. Travis is shot whilst trying to run away and run into a nearby car. And Hooker stands his ground. Sorry, Whit tries to run Hooker over, gets to the car, tries to run Hooker over. Hooker stands his ground and shoots him through the windscreen. Dead. And Hooker runs over and he's dead. You hear some fire in the background, but Hooker doesn't seem that perturbed.
No, he ain't bothered
just stood by the car. That car might blow up. Don't matter. McNeil goes and has a word with him, tells him that Hooker's a bit of a loose cannon, insane and certifiable according to his wife. But Hooker just laughs it off. Hey. McNeil is satisfied. That's it. All right. We get a triumphant music. Dun, dun, dun. Back at the academy, the recruits are sent off with their new partners, and Romano is teamed up with Hooker as the army of new recruits head out onto the streets. And that's it. And there the show ends. Now, in all honesty, despite some funny bits and bits like this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And aside from some padding, I quite enjoyed this sort of slow burn escalation of the two antagonists and how they were plotted it. And like, it had nothing to do with Hooker in the grand scheme of things. It was just two, you had the baddies. Recruits and the baddies. They're just doing their own thing. They will come together at some point, but they're not like, I was like, when, it's not stupid plots like the guy with the plane in Blue Thunder and things like that.
No.
So, stuff like this just felt a bit more grounded. Okay. The use of the Academy, I thought gave the show a good way of tackling that, placing veteran, so you've got the old guys and the new guys trying to working together. That's kind of a good balance there. And I also liked some of the smattering of dissenting views to Hookers. There's questions about it. It's usually by the wives of the recruits. We kind of see him for what he is. The recruits are all a bit starstruck at this point. And it'd be interesting to see if you watch the show, whether that actually changed. I'm going to guess it probably doesn't.
Yeah.
But here it's like the wives are all like, his ex-wife is like, you like living on the edge, you're certifiable. McNeil's wife, basically, I don't agree with him. I don't, what is. He sounds like he's something from the 60s and all this kind of stuff. And they don't. And that was quite interesting. But everyone else is kind of like, oh, no, he's just trying to get things done. And that's where this episode could have been a bit better. It could have explored that a bit more. Hooker's character is epitomised in one line in the bar where he says, I've seen the past, gentlemen, and it works. So he wants everything back away. He gives this sort of speech about how everything's like was cool in the past. Boxers didn't sort of stop because they had a bad tummy, and it was all right. They decided to go back to the old ways.
Men were men, and women were women.
Yeah, exactly. This is echoed in the conversation with the women in the store midway through. They've bemoaning the lack of policing. This, this feeling that society's falling apart, and because of this lack of police action, so we say it's lack of law and order. It feels like a very conservative show. Like I said at this point, it's we need law and order. This needs to be in place, and then people will not be like this. And it's carried through with the depiction of Whit and Travis. There's no real attempt at justifying their behaviour in this. They are just bad people with a capital B and P.
Yeah, ex-cons.
Just ex-cons, career criminals, no issue with gunning people down for $17. And when they're finally killed, they justify the show's motto of shoot first and worry about the legalities later. There's no follow-up on this. It's just back out on patrol. It's like, yeah, okay, well, good. Well done. You did the thing. Because there's a bit in the middle where Hooker was shot and he shot someone. I think the whole plot was put Hooker in where he is. His partner was killed. He shot the person that killed her, and it's being investigated. And he's been let off the hook, but there's
still grey
murkiness around what happened. And and there's no follow up on this, like I said with Whit and Thingy. And this is a bit odd because we know that Whit has left behind a widow and fatherless child, but who cares? Not to worry. Hooker gets to make a joke and ride out with Romano. It's all good. It's all well and good. It's that 80s, this is not a show to sort of delve into those themes, but those themes are kind of here. So there is sort of, maybe it's trying to do something, but in the context of that, I don't know. It takes a lot of cues from Magnum Force, I thought. The second Dirty Harry movie.
Yeah, similar. There's some similarities there, I think.
Yeah, because that's all about recruits, isn't it? The sort of new recruits that are coming up, and they're getting hired and sort of recruiting to turn them into mindless guns for hire on the streets. There's that sort of element. He's trying to turn these recruits into just shoot them, kill them. And, like people like English who couldn't do it, well, you're no good. You're no good. Get out. We don't need you. So there's stuff going on here. But it's hard to sort of say whether it's good or not. I don't know. I found it's an interesting watch because I think there's actually an attempt here at portraying a character who's rooted in the past and unable to change. And that's quite an interesting thing. And I would, like I said, I'd be interested to see if that went through the rest of the shows. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But here, there is an inkling that might be an arc that is being set up, with him being influenced by whatever. There's a show, though, that had to appeal to mass audiences in 1982. It's sabotaged by the need for quick justice and wanton violence. You can't, it needs those things. Get in. It needs some shooting. And those bad guys need to pay the price. They've been bad and they need to be killed. And they are. And that's that. So overall, I think most of the characters in this, they're pretty well drawn. There's some decent stuff. There's attempts at, giving them backgrounds with, everyone's been to Nam, which I suppose they're all in their 30s. Most of them, they seem to be of that age, late 20s at least. So there's that kind of elements being brought into it as well. So I didn't mind it. It's not terrible. I just questioned what it was trying to say. I didn't get it. I didn't get what the message was. And maybe there wasn't one, but maybe there was. I don't know. I gave it a 6. I did quite enjoy it, though. It wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be, put it that way. And I did like that kind of disassociated structure of the two stories. I thought it was quite interesting. What about you?
It's an interesting time for cop shows in the early 80s. There's obviously some societal discussion happening in and around not just the cop shows, but the cop films around that time about law and order on the streets, the inability for the justice system to really be effective in justice. And a lot of these shows seem to be playing into that. I thought this was a really peculiar mix of police academy style recruiting and then some really odd stereotypes, but sort of given a weird sense of legitimacy because it had Shatner in it, who brings, I mean, he's a good actor. He might be criticism aside from Shatner. He brings, he's a veteran of TV shows and he brings that to this. So he brings the kind of seriousness to that role. Even though his suits are way too tight, he brings the seriousness to it. But you end up, and I think, as we'll discuss when we get to Hunter, but I think the story here was just they were trying to build the characters first, which is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think they perhaps didn't quite get the balance right, because I think there was too many characters to try and focus on. They were trying too quickly to exit characters before they'd actually established any characters and establish plot lines that were neither here nor there. There seemed to be a little bit too much filler where they could have just put more exploratory stuff in about Shatner's character, about TJ Hooker, because he was by far the most interesting character in it. He's obviously got quite a salubrious past in the sense that he's divorced. His family life isn't what it used to be. It's not acrimonious, but it's neither is it a great relationship he has with his ex-wife. He's clearly got some kind of drink problem that's alluded to. He's quite a complicated character, whereas the others all seem a little bit one-dimensional, and especially the old peacock, the living peacock, with his, his hair just pops up. So I found that when you have too many characters to focus on and they're going in so many directions, they're either trying to pick, it's a pilot, so they're trying to see which characters stick and which ones people warm to, and those will be the ones that make it as showrunners.
Yeah.
Or but my feeling from this was that it leaves you feeling a little bit unsympathetic for the wrong characters and the right characters. So you end up with characters that you should feel sympathy for, but you don't. It's people being shot and one guy dies and Shatner's just like, yeah, he's dead when he comes out. He didn't make it.
Yeah.
Then he adds his kind of sort of, his sadness around that to it in this kind of a more, because he plays that character particularly well. So he's all about duty. So when he finds out that one of his recruits has died, he talks duty first and then he takes it personally. And I like that dimension of his character, but he's the only character that seemed to do that. All the others were over English's death in about 30 seconds. They're like, really? He died? Oh, it's terrible. Oh, well.
Yeah. Country's death. Country's death,
sorry, yeah. So I think, I liked the setup of the bad guys was good initially, even though it was a really big close-up of a gun. The setup was interesting in that they were just ex-cons, and exactly for the same reason that you said. It was because they just had no motive. They were just bad dudes. Living a rough life, hand-to-mouth existence, clearly just career criminals, and that was interesting. And there was nothing likable about them, apart from they started to sort of inject weird humour into it later when he spat out his chicken and said, "I'm going to order a burger. Do you want a burger?" It took a really weird comedic turn at that point. I'm like, these are multiple serial murderers having a joke about chicken and burgers. It was weird.
Yeah. It's like him forgetting what they were supposed to be doing in the car. Like, hey, see those two? Yeah, we're about them. Let's go rob them. Oh, yeah, we're robbers.
There's a moment after they've shot those where they go back to the car, and it's clear that out the two robbers, what's the other one called? Not Wet, the other one, I forget his name. But Travis. He's clearly troubled by what they've done, but it's never really explored. He just plays it that way. So he's kind of quiet, and he's like, "What's wrong with you?" And there's interesting little seeds planted here and there. Little moments. So I quite liked it for that. But my only issue with it was I found myself looking in lots of different directions for other characters to be interested in apart from TJ Hooker. Because if you took him out, there was literally nothing left in it. Not really any other characters. It was just like watching, obviously it came later, but like watching a Police Academy movie without any humour in it. But that said, it as a pilot show, it was bold in what it was trying to do. And it really did have the added advantage of having William Shatner in it. Because as much as he is William Shatner, he's still doing pretty good. I
wondered how long it would be before one of us did an impression.
We may as well do it. So I gave it a 6 as well, strangely enough, for story and characters, because I was quite impressed with it. It just didn't get me into the right characters in the right way. But I suppose that's what the series would be for, right?
Yeah. I think it was just a bit too scattershot.
Yeah, it was. But I think that's the nature of the pilots, and as we've come to discuss them, is that sometimes they do this. They just throw a lot of characters out there, and the ones that the the TV show audiences go, we like that one. They're the ones that are going to be in the season runners and the showrunners. Well,
there we go.
So that's a double 6, isn't it? For
it is. I filled the sheeting.
Well, let me tell you of Hunter then.
Do it.
Oh, goodness me. So a crime, again, like you said, crime drama. Frank Lupo, we've seen around loads of times. He's Mr. A-Team. He did the A-Team, essentially. He's best known for that.
All right, okay.
Frank Lupo.
Yeah.
This particular pilot episode was called Hunter. It was actually originally in 2 parts. I watched it all in one because, it's exciting. But it was actually in 2 parts, quite long episodes. This was directed by somebody called Ron Satlov. Now, he was the assistant director on the Scorsese film Mean Streets, which tells you a lot about the way this was shot at night.
Yeah,
and he also did loads of other TV shows, including things like McCloud and stuff like that. And of course, the executive producer here was Stephen J. Cannell. Well, he did the Rockford Files, A-Team, Mike Hammer, Hardcastle and McCormick. He's the guy that pulls the typewriter and deforms the C at the end on all those shows. Yeah. That's him. He did it. He made that. So just doing a quick word of on the cast. So here, like you said at the beginning, of course, so we've got our amazing hero, Hunter, played by Fred Dreyer. He's actually an ex-pro footballer in the US. Ex-pro footballer turned actor. We've seen that before, haven't we? That seems to be a bit of a trope. He was the defensive end for the New York Giants and the Los Angeles Rams at a certain point before he retired and went into acting. Stephanie Kramer, of course, as Detective Dee McCall. And then we've got a few others. There's also a few other people in here that I think are just interesting. And some of them are only in the pilot episode. So Michael Kavanagh is Captain Lester D. Kane. And Brian Dennehy, of course, is in this. 2 years out of First Blood at this point. He plays Dr. Bolan, which is interesting. But there are some other interesting side characters, as you discovered in yours. Stephen Williams is in this. He plays one of the policemen in this. And you recognize him because he was in Jason Goes to Hell, It, and he plays the cop in the Blues Brothers that goes, boys, you're in real trouble. That's him.
All right, okay. Yeah.
In this one, of course, he plays the one-eyed pimp. We'll talk about it in a minute. Michael Kavanagh, who I mentioned a minute ago. Now, Michael Kavanagh, you might recognize him from The Enforcer and The Gauntlet, which are both Clint Eastwood movies, and the former one, of course, is one of the Dirty Harry films. So that's why you've seen him before. No wonder he's in it, really.
Yeah.
We've also got the blonde that gets murdered at the start. Kathy O'Neill is her name in the show. But that's actress Tawny Moyer, who is the nurse that gets stabbed in the back and lifted up in Halloween 2 in that famous scene. You wonder where you saw her before.
Oh, okay. Weird.
And if you're wondering where you might have seen Dee McCall before, real name, as I say, Stephanie Kramer, she was the quote unquote, this is how she's credited, the pretty girl that gets hit by the car in The Man with Two Brains.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Vaguely, yes.
And let's set this a little bit of the scene about the show. So the show was heavily inspired by the popularity of the Dirty Harry films. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
No.
And leans into this heavily for its gritty street aesthetics and pretty much everything. The film, obviously, Dirty Harry, was produced and directed by Don Siegel in 1971, so a good 13 years before Hunter. But there were a further 4 films in total, including the aforementioned Magnum Force, The Enforcer, Sudden Impact, and the later Deadpool. So we went all the way up to Sudden Impact for this one. Dirty Harry was, of course, the infamous Clint Eastwood character, Dirty Harry Callahan. So named because he was always assigned all the dirty jobs that came along. The character of Callahan is notorious for his unorthodox, violent, and ruthless methods against criminals and killers he is assigned to apprehend. At the same time, he is assigned a partner who is usually either killed or seriously injured during the film, which is something that Hunter takes a huge pinch from.
Yep.
There's also a look to the Dirty Harry films. They were set in San Francisco, but were often a bold mix of bright sunshine, daytime scenes and gritty urban nighttime and underworld type locations. The night and day contrast always worked well against the backdrop of 2 main characters, Harry and his partner, who are usually pitched at opposite ends of the rulebook sort of procedural sort of end. Sort of a good cop, bad cop kind of idea, maybe. And in the first Dirty Harry movie, Harry finds himself pitched against the killer known as Scorpio, himself molded from several real serial killers at that time. So up against an unpredictable and violent sociopath and psychopath, Harry is left wondering how dirty his methods really are when faced with such brutal opponents, which is that trope and that theme we mentioned, because they all seem malevolent and wise to the perceived weaknesses of the law. In short, Harry feels the law is stupid and unprepared to deal with such a brand of maniac, and only his brand of violence will work against such violence. Deep themes indeed, I think, safe to say. And I mention these because this is also the theme of Hunter, which seems somewhat heavy for a TV cop entertainment show.
Well, it's the same as TJ Hooker, really. I mean, that was his
exactly.
as well, wasn't it?
Hunter's set in Los Angeles as opposed to San Francisco, but the lighting, cameras, urban environments, nighttime scenes, police station characters, and costumes are all pretty much lifted from the Dirty Harry films. in how they're portrayed. Even the theme, at least in terms of the pilot, is leaning right into the film series, as does the look of Hunter, how he carries himself, how he responds, and how he holds a gun. Of course, infamously, Dirty Harry used a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, which would blow your head clean off, but resulting in the infamous, the famous Magnum gun sound that you hear in all the Dirty Harry movies. And even with this trope, the .44 Magnum, amongst many others, including a Desert Eagle, is also used by Hunter in the TV show, which is kind of strange to see somebody running around with a .44 Magnum. Anyway, make no mistake, this is Dirty Harry, the TV Dirty Harry, or Dirty Harry Light, Slightly Grubby Harry, Mucky Larry, Dirty Barry. Rick Hunter is the Aldi Dirty Barry, is my final statement on that. So
it's little Dirty Harry.
It is little Harry. Anyway, so let's start with the story and let's get into this story very quickly. Then, okay, the pilot episode of Hunter wastes no time in setting the tone. It's gritty and dark. A murderer is on the loose in Los Angeles and is brutally killing blonde country and western fans on Wednesdays with seemingly no motive and leaving no clues or any kind of evidence.
There's not a lot else to do on Wednesdays. They were boring back in the 80s.
This backdrop serves as a solid introduction to LAP detective Rick Hunter, played by Fred Dry, as I said, a rule-breaking maverick with a dark family background and a serious distrust of bureaucracy. His world collides with Dee Dee McCall, played by Stephanie Kramer, some kind of vice cop working undercover as a prostitute to try and ensnare the local crime boss. She's no sidekick in this, though, with a clearer alternative sense of righteous justice. Together, they investigate the brutal murders, leading them through LA's weird country and western underbelly, such as that would be one, and deep into painful 80s cop departmental politics, here depicted in the usual bosses at the top, frustrated with the cops not following rules and becoming more violent than the criminals. So the story then, a young blonde woman is seen having fun on a mechanical bull, intercut with someone nefarious getting ready in what looks like country and western garb. They also seem to have some kind of flick knife that pops out of their sleeve, which is, I guess, ingenious, but it is reminding me of the one in Taxi Driver. They also have to have some kind of, so the woman is seen leaving the club bar after some mild flirting with one of her male friends, after fumbling her car keys and taking way too long to pick them up, because clearly that's a very difficult thing to do. She gets frightened by her friend, but then she drives home because he just scares her. She is actually being followed by a mystery man in the loudest mini truck van ever heard. As she tries to get into her house, now seemingly confused by the mere concept of keys, and dropping them and using the wrong ones and not knowing what to do. All the while, the mystery man approaches her, forces his way into her house, and, though not shown, it is implied she is murdered. End scene there. Pretty grim. Mm-hmm. Next, we see Hunter driving a dilapidated car on some kind of patrol through the city streets. Though a call is made on his radio for a 211, whatever that is, he is told not to attend because he is already under some kind of investigation and his methods do not meet approval. And we've seen that pretty much the same as TJ Hooker type idea, really. Hunter complains his car is broken and heads to the bank to, I can only assume, meet his security guard friend that works there, because he just goes off to the bank. He seems to have no purpose in that bank.
No, it doesn't.
We see there are some suspicious characters dotted about. While Hunter does something bank-related, it's hard to know what exactly that is. He just goes to the back and starts doing bank stuff. The bank is robbed at gunpoint. Though they're trying to be sneaky, it's kind of obvious what they're doing, especially to Hunter, who immediately confronts one of the robbers, pulls out a gun, and blasts one of the others, but he misses. Yeah. The one holding that's the one holding the shotgun to the bank clerk. One of the robbers runs out of the bank and dives into the getaway car outside, leaving Hunter and his security friend to give chase. Presumably, they just left the other three robbers in the bank with the public, having neither arrested or disarmed anyone at the time. They also can't call this into the main office as Hunter's radio has broken his car. Anyway, never mind that. Cue the car chase.
And also,
just leave the criminals in there.
And also don't forget there's that really odd bit where they can't get into the car. One of the doors doesn't work and he has to climb over it.
Because his car's all broken and bad.
Stupid.
Yeah, a sense of trope they're trying to establish in this. I suppose it's pretty gritty. Wouldn't look out of place in Dirty Harry, the car chase, screeching tyres, gunman taking pot shot at Hunter's car. It's shot exactly like you would expect a Magnum Force chase to be. Driving around traffic and tight Los Angeles back streets, at a certain point, the getaway car driver is distracted by the laughing of his shotgun shooting compadre, takes a wrong turn-ish and ends up flying over a wooden fence in quite a spectacular stunt. Of course, Hunter does the same, and the chase continues. Sirens, shotgun blasts, windscreens shattering, dusty roads and back streets. Hunter ends up pulling out some kind of super-powered handheld shotgun.
Where do you have that stored?
Seemingly from nowhere. Takes a single shot that blows out the getaway's car tyres, which then prompts another spectacular stunt as the car launches off a ramp and spins corkscrew style through the air, crashing into a heap.
A-team.
Absolutely A-team. By a miracle, and against all the laws of physics and mechanical possibility, both the bank robbers emerge from the car unscathed and are arrested, claiming they had rights, quote unquote. And the implication that these had been infringed by Hunter's shoot-first style. One of them tries to pull a knife. Hunter immediately punches him unconscious, then delivers the Miranda rights in classic Dirty Harry style. And so he's like, pow, he's unconscious. You have the right to remain silent. Da-da-da-da. Next act, Captain Kane, played by Michael Kavanagh, is setting his expectations. The street should not be a war zone, and they all need to follow proper procedures, rules, not something Hunter wants to bother with. He makes his feelings known about the new rules, including rights, warning shots, and such. The new captain wants psychiatric evaluations. He introduces Dr. Bolan, that's Brian Dennehy's character, and he introduced himself in a weird speech about dreams, body control, and psychological trauma.
That scene is so odd. Like, what are you on about?
And that they all then, after he spends the first 2 or 3 minutes of a conversation traumatizing them, tells them they all need to look after their mental health. Weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's difficult to take any of that seriously, given how close this was to him playing the corrupt sheriff straight out of First Blood. No, strange. Hunter and Dr. Bolan and Captain Kane confront one another in the office, and Kane orders Hunter to a 10-day psych evaluation or be on suspension. Kane sets the tone here quite sort of immediately. He doesn't like Hunter, his methods, or his partners, whom we hear have been injured. So very similar to the Dirty Harry trope there. Hunter is told his new partner is someone called Bernie Tallywagger. That's his name. Someone whom he does not like. He drives off without him and finds Sergeant Dee Dee McCall, Stephanie Kramer, an undercover cop currently dressed like a prostitute and looking to arrest a pimp. She isn't happy that Hunter just rolls up and blows her cover immediately, which I'm sure would be pretty dangerous to an undercover cop anyway. I'm also sure, though, it seems like a sort of a weird trope of 70s, 80s cop shows that in the US, undercover cops always seem to dress as prostitutes, which would limit their effectiveness and their arrest records. Anyway, she plays at being the lonely, down-out prostitute at some kind of pointless subterfuge for some reason, and then Hunter interferes and crashes his car into the pimp. The pimp pulls out a gun and Dee Dee kicks some ass. Opening credit stuff right there, kind of, straight in the opening credits, that. Now we've met Sergeant Dee Dee McCall, so I have to say at this point, Hunter seems to imply he has a family in prison because they've got the kind of pimp on the bonnet of the car and arresting him for no crime at this moment because they don't really tell him what he's actually done. Hunter says that when he goes to prison, he's got people that he knows are going to beat him up, including what seems to be his family members because he comes from some kind of crime syndicate family. Really strange. Anyway, and then they say to him that it would only have been leaving the scene of an accident, which he didn't cause, until he pulled the gun on them. Now, of course, it's a lot worse of him. Strange. So kind of frame him for that. Hunter pitches a partnership to Dee Dee. Seems like they're both outcasts, and with a disregard for following procedures, Hunter's idea is that they show up for the precinct-type duties and act as partners, but they're really still working on their own. Dee Dee isn't totally sold on the idea, but she agrees anyway. Note this conversation happens just down the road from where they arrested the pimp, who is still standing by Hunter's car.
Yep. Just like the two bank robbers. They just leave a trail of criminals in his way.
Exactly. I'm not sure how effective her cover's going to be now either. Anyway, they agree that they won't have anything to do with each other's cases. Dee Dee is trying to take down some kind of kingpin known as King Hayes. And Hunter, well, I'm assuming he has something to do.
He's got to go do the bank stuff. He didn't do it after all.
No, he goes back to the bank to finish off his bank-related shenanigans. Hunter and Dee Dee pitch their plan to Captain Kane. He doesn't like it, though. But he can't stop them for some reason. He seems to have no way of stopping them from becoming partners. Once they've decided that's the rules. So he then established his own rules. Since Hunter has trashed his previously trashed car, he's given an even more trashed one as a replacement. I'm sensing the establishment of a running joke there. As Hunter and Dee Dee drive away, though, Hunter amuses Dee Dee, explaining that the car used to be used by a dog sniffer patrol, but the dog ate a bag of cocaine and went crazy in the car. Hence why everything's ripped to pieces. It seemed like a really weird story. Just a really strange story to explain why he got a broken car. You didn't need to do that. And then a murder call comes in over the radio. Hunter makes some kind of quip about it, which is strange. Drops Dee Dee off in seemingly the middle of nowhere and heads to the scene.
Yeah, why does he drop her off?
I don't know. They're not having anything to do with each other's cases, even though, as we'll see, this isn't his case. Anyway, it's the scene of the murder from the beginning of the episode. The crime scene is full of cop-type people, none wearing any specialist gear, though, so no point looking for any DNA evidence. And then, bizarrely, one guy's dusting for fingerprints on a doorframe with a magnifying glass. Weird. And the person that eventually found the poor dead woman has been seated 3 feet from her, covered corpse. Hunter is told that he's very traumatized, which is probably best explained by him being made to sit with the corpse of his work colleague for hours, just staring at it under a blanket. Anyway, Hunter has a discussion where a comment is passed that he's now teamed up with, quote-unquote, the brass cupcake, a.k.a. Dee Dee. Hunter then inexplicably takes evidence, which is a set of keys from the scene, after the other officer dusting for print says they'll be of no use to him.
The worst print duster ever. These be any use to you? Nah.
No, don't need them. It also appears that Hunter is known departmentally as Headhunter. Catchy. Hunter leaves the scene with the evidence in his pocket. Pretty sure that's a bad idea. He then goes to the murder victim's car, climbs in and starts the engine. The radio plays country and western music. Meanwhile, this leaves Hunter contaminating and destroying any evidence that might have helped.
Yeah,
Oh, well.
absolutely.
Oh, well.
Oh, well.
Captain Kane, who has a habit of doing this throughout the entire show, appears from nowhere and challenges Hunter to not overthink this case. Hunter thinks this is similar to a murder that happened the previous week with the same MO. Captain Kane advises caution as he wants to avoid a citywide panic. That would happen if they announced that some kind of multiple or serial murder was on the loose. Captain Kane also notes that Dee Dee is not with Hunter and wonders where she is. Captain Kane informs Hunter that this murder case is not his, as, since he did not show up with Dee Dee, they are not the first unit on the scene, and hands the case over to the haphazard detective Tallywagger. Hunter isn't happy about that. They also openly discuss the scene, the murder, including the method of the murder, and the victim outside in the full view of everyone, which I'm pretty sure is also a bad idea. Not good policing.
It's terrible.
Anyway, Captain Kane is on to Hunter and Dee Dee's partner, but not partner's plan, and tells them that unless they are together all the time, and he will be checking, they will be under investigation by internal affairs, presumably for not partnering properly, I guess.
Yeah, because he just pop up from nowhere. It's like a Charlton and the Wheelies.
He does. Then in a dazzling moment of 80s-style sex discrimination, Hunter tells Kane that Dee Dee isn't around because she is having quote-unquote female problems, and that he shouldn't hold that against her because it would be discriminatory. In spite of the tone and stupidity of that statement, Kane looks sheepish. Has he crossed the line? Cut to Dee Dee being threatened by the king. Again, another 80s stereotype of a black male pimp, this time with an eye patch. The 80s stereotypes are rolling around in this, I'm afraid, and all of them borrowing heavily from Dirty Harry, because the exact same thing happens in that. Things take a weird turn. King hits out at Dee Dee and threatens the prostitute that is sort of there all the time. She's always hanging around with this other woman. Dee Dee immediately breaks cover and aims for the arrest of King to prevent him from killing the prostitute. She shoots King. And then also, as she tries to stop King's driver escaping, Hunter shows up randomly and just in time, stands in the middle of the street and shoots at the car from a gun with no muzzle flash that fires no bullets. Of course, this causes the driver to lose control of the car and fly through the air in another corkscrew launch of some boxes, A-Team style. Another moment for the opening credits, I fear. Just random, indeed. Just flies. It didn't even get that much speed up in the car. Hunter takes his time again in the street to explain his concerns about the recent murders. 2 dead blondes on 2 consecutive Wednesdays. He thinks there is a random killer out there. It's not random if they're on consecutive Wednesdays. He thinks this will keep happening. Dee Dee says catching random killers is very difficult. Dee Dee reminds Hunter he never caught the quote-unquote Parkside Strangler, which I guess means that A, that killer is still at large, B, the killer is known by a name, and C, a citywide panic is already underway, which kind of defeats Captain Kane's earlier point. Hunter goes almost full Dirty Harry at this point too. In conversation, again, exposition by the medium of driving in a car, Dee Dee, now dressed normally, suggests that Hunter is the only partner she has had that so far hasn't hit on her randomly. Hunter doesn't seem interested, asks where she learned to shoot so well. He also says they can talk more when they've solved the murder case, and she agrees. Okay, really weird. Hunter and Dee Dee then break into the scene of the first murder, the one before the one we saw at the start. We didn't see this one, to look for clues. Dee Dee tries to advise Hunter that this is a bad idea, given the police tape over the door entrance saying the crime scene, do not enter. Unhindered, he encourages Dee Dee to pick the lock, even though that would still break the tape, and they don't need to because they're the police. It's okay for the police to break a police line. Remember, they're not supposed to be on this case, though, I suppose. Presumably, they have nothing else to do at this point because they're just doing what they want. So they're investigating someone else's case. Investigate your own. I'm sure you've got a caseload. Heavy exposition scene here. Hunter and Dee Dee try to figure out if there's any connection between the killer's victims, why they're on Wednesdays, for example. They do this while tampering with evidence in the scene of a crime, which seems counterproductive. Hunter is convinced they were killed by the same person, even though he has no evidence of any kind, no suspects, no motive, no murder weapon, and only a hypothesis based on the victims being blonde and having their throats cut. Hunter turns on the radio, and by chance, it's playing country and western music. A link! Both of the victims were listening to country and western music, maybe the same singer. Then as they look around, they find a pair of cowgirl boots, a load of cowgirl hats, and paraphernalia, and handily enough, a freshly laundered branded t-shirt for a place called the Black Stallion. Seems odd that no one investigating that murder, whomever that was, made any of these connections or indeed found that branded t-shirt.
No one cares.
These theorizes that you'd only have a branded t-shirt for a place you spent a lot of time at, or if it was given to you. How many country and western bars are there in Los Angeles? Must be a few. Anyway, then in a moment of utter weirdness, Hunter removes the victim's clothes from the cupboard and suggests that Dee Dee wears them using a blonde wig, and they aim to entrap the killer with Dee Dee as the lure. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can use the clothes of a deceased victim in a lure anyway. They decide that that's what the plan is. Hunter heads to his appointment with Dr. Bolan and is informed he needs to keep coming back on a weekly basis. Hunter isn't happy and goes into full Dirty Harry mode, stating he is onto Captain Kane's plan to have him ruled unsuitable to remain on the force with the help of Dr. Bolan. Dr. Bolan informs him he needs to pass his psych examinations or that is exactly what will happen, but also implies that this is really what Captain Kane had planned. even indicating that he needs to meet Hunter 3 times only and then decide his fate. A lot of power in Boland's hands. More brief exposition near the car, and then we're heading back to the Black Stallion Country and Western Entertainment Bar. Hunter hangs at the bar looking like a cop at a bar. Meanwhile, Dee Dee, now in a blonde wig, frequents with the customers and makes her presence felt. Hunter observes this in a way that makes him look like a stalking killer. Hunter is distracted by the bartender woman as she flirts with him badly. Meanwhile, a seemingly suspicious person whom we see via close-up of cowboy boots and beer glass seems to head off in Dee Dee's direction. Hunter notices and sneaks off following, heads to the car park and sneaks around suspiciously watching Dee Dee drive away. He then is confronted by a group of angry-looking men from the bar who, rightly, are suspicious of his antics, given that one of their friends was brutally murdered only the previous week, or at least that's the implication.
Yes.
We're only at this location because of the first murder, which we don't see. Presumably they're talking about the second one, which we did. So have there been 2 people murdered that went to that bar? And how did nobody notice that? Meanwhile, the killer...
Police is rubbish.
Yeah, really, yeah. Meanwhile, the killer, with the close-up of the boots, gets into the car, the same one as the opening scene, the loud one, and drives away, presumably after Dee Dee. Hunter sees the driver, it's Dr. Boland, then has a fight with all the angry men in the car park until they discover he's a cop. Then he tries to contact Dee Dee and can't reach her, and his crappy car doesn't start. He's useless.
Why didn't he just tell him he was a cop before the fight?
I don't know. Meanwhile, in a rerun of the opening scene, Dee Dee is now being followed home, and we see that it is indeed the killer, or at least the killer that we used the sleevey flick knife thing. Hunter commandeers a car from the car park, disrupting the occupants from their sexy rocking the truck antics.
Weird.
And zooms to Dee Dee's place in it with them in the back. He breaks into the complex where she lives by alerting everyone in the apartment building by buzzing every doorbell, then shoots the lock out of one of the stairwell doors and bursts into her apartment to find Dee Dee in the bath. Exposition time again. Hunter and Dee Dee agree they might have enticed the killer with a potential victim, given that she was followed home by someone, but the killer then left. Then it's revealed that it's not, and it's also then revealed that this isn't a Wednesday, so they weren't even doing it on the right day.
Just rubbish. They're rubbish.
So now, even though Hunter has revealed he is a cop to everyone and the bar, and broke in and shot out the doors and told everyone at Dee Dee's apartment complex that he's a cop, they expect the killer to have targeted Dee Dee and maybe return. It also struck me as odd that in the last scene, Dee Dee was suspicious of someone following her and just went home and had a bath, as opposed to getting ready to be attacked.
Well, you know.
I suppose she did have a gun in the bath.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hunter also lets Dee Dee know he saw Dr. Boland in the car that followed her. The plot thickens. This is an extended scene where Hunter and Dee Dee establish more of a friendship and open up to each other. Dee Dee reveals that her deceased husband, Cop, was a good person. Hunter reveals nothing other than he is a mobster's son and that he isn't ready to quit, and prepares Dee Dee for the inevitable time when they hit the wall, whatever that means. There's an attempt to humanize the characters here. It kind of works as they express at least a moment of affection, fun with each other. However, the killer is watching from the window from below, seeing both Hunter and Dee Dee. He knows something, maybe. Hunter and Dee Dee then head to the mansion of Dr. Boland. This is really weird, this. They sneak around breaking more rules and spot a vehicle that might be suspicious, with no real evidence, but seems to be more a list of motoring offences. Hunter and Dee Dee then break into the mansion of the doctor looking for clues. They know they can't use any evidence if they find it, but they're looking for it anyway, and Dee Dee then breaks in again, and then they sneak in and head to the first room they see and look for evidence, even though this is a mansion with what looks like a lot of rooms. Hunter heads to the nearest closet and immediately finds a cowboy hat, which, even though it proves nothing whatsoever, is used here as the key clue that links the potential suspect to the Black Stallion. Does that not mean that every single cowboy hat-owning person in LA would be a suspect? Did I take this job for a quick buck? Anyway, they also find a pair of cowboy boots. Boots we know are the ones the killer was wearing because we've seen them, but boots that neither Hunter nor Dee Dee have any idea about. To them, they're just cowboy boots. Hunter and Dee Dee then leave, but then they realise they literally have no proof of anything, so they revert back to the plan. Wednesdays, that's the trap we need to set. At this point, we hear, "Works for me," catchphrase for the first time since the opening credits. I'll come back to that. Later, presumably Wednesday, we have to assume, Dee Dee in her blonde wig is in her apartment on the balcony and the killer is revealed to be watching her. She is somewhat suspicious, but it is then revealed that Hunter is hiding in her closet. So this must be their trap for the killer, which seems really stupid.
Yeah.
Dee Dee is alerted at some odd noises. The lights don't work. We see the killer is around as he flashes his blade. Dee Dee notices the door chain is broken. The killer is there somewhere. Dee Dee checks things out, and she's definitely being watched and seems pretty scared at one point. The killer attacks Dee Dee. She disarms him. Hunter emerges from the closet, read nothing into that, and promptly interferes so that the killer can escape. He takes a shot and misses, which he's done all the way through this because he cannot hit anything, and Dee Dee and Hunter give chase. The killer waits on the stairs and takes shots at Hunter instead of escaping. Then Dee Dee leaps from the balcony of at least a 3-story building and lands uninjured on her feet. It's quite the leap. It's quite the leap.
Yeah,
It's no way she did shatter her ankles. Anyway, the killer runs away. Hunter fires more shots and misses constantly. Dee Dee shoots the killer as he tries to escape, while Hunter gets maced by a stricken granny from the apartments. They finally have the killer, and then it's revealed it's not Dr. Boland, but someone they didn't know. But I think we saw briefly walking into Dr. Boland's office earlier in the episode, and maybe he's the guy from the start. It's not clear. Anyway, Captain Kane appears from nowhere, and he's not pleased that Hunter and Dee Dee were working on a case that isn't theirs and shooting suspects with no real evidence of anything or any kind. The person did attack Dee Dee, I suppose, but, well, procedures and rules were not followed. They need to hand over the details to the detectives that were actually the people in charge of the case. Hunter and Dee Dee remain suspicious of Dr. Boland, as they can't understand why someone would be at the same bar as them and leave at the same time as someone. And in spite of the fact they have no evidence that somebody has... In spite of the fact they have no evidence and that somebody has already tried to kill Dee Dee, they remain convinced that is not their killer.
Nope.
Next day, while having a hot dog, Hunter and Dee Dee are followed, and then car chase again. It transpires they're being followed by Hunter's mob uncle boss in his limo, who wants Hunter to attend more family events and make weird mob-like threats if he doesn't. I've no idea why this scene is even in it. It's really strange.
Nope.
It literally serves no purpose. Hunter and Dee Dee then head to the office of Dr. Kettering, played by Joanna Kearns, another psychologist whom we've never mentioned before, and who they choose to discuss their investigation with, including naming their preferred suspect, Dr. Boland. Dr. Kettering, it turns out, is Dr. Boland's psychiatrist. So they essentially go to see if Boland fits the profile of a sociopath by asking his own psychologist. It's another weird scene, and she sort of says, I can't say anything. We get the full sociopaths are crazy mad people, and the Hunter and Dee Dee basically accuse the patient of being a murderer. And she kind of agrees with that could be the case. It's a very strange scene, actually. However, in keeping with her psychiatrists know about killers, and given this is the early 80s, there have been a bunch of high-profile serial murders in the real US at this point, of course, and the US involvement of the newest FBI profiling, etc. So psychologists know about murders and stuff. So this is kind of working that logic a bit. Hunter and Dee Dee leave Dr. Kettering's office after scaring the living crap out of her by telling her that Dr. Boland is likely to try and kill her, something based on no evidence other than she's blonde.
Yep.
Really random. Hunter then heads to see Dr. Boland, confronts him about all of his suspicions, including how he is a sociopath, how he framed one of his patients, the guy that attacked Dee Dee. Now he plans to kill his own psychiatrist, Dr. Kettering, even though he has no evidence to support any of those claims whatsoever on a case that technically is resolved and for whom they have a suspect, and one that isn't even meant to be they're not meant to be working on anyway. Hunter then threatens Dr. Boland, saying that if he speaks to Captain Kane about any of this, he will essentially stalk him and drive him crazy. Dr. Boland shouts in frustration, telling Hunter to shut up.
That's very funny, that bit.
Good Hunter be right. Or else this weird ranting threat of stalking driven him over the edge. Hunter and Dee Dee celebrate their victory of sorts, having driven Dr. Boland over the edge, and then agree to wait till Wednesday and his attack. Works for me. Catchphrase is said again. Cut to the night. On Tuesday, the killer is getting his boots and knife ready. We see Dr. Boland, Terry Boland by name, calling on Dr. Kettering. He's acting weird, although we never see Boland actually putting the boots on at this point or getting the knife ready. The implication is that he is the killer, and now Dr. Kettering is in for it, for no reason, and it's still Tuesday. Boland challenges Dr. Kettering about speaking to Hunter and Dee Dee, as she says she didn't say anything. Dr. Kettering slips into another room under the pretense of getting a drink, which is the most obvious I'm going over there now moment I've ever seen. While Boland gets his killer gloves on and makes his move to attack in the room, Dr. Kettering has her back to the door and is making a phone call to the police to alert them that Dr. Boland is acting strange. I'm not sure that's a crime, though. Nope. He walks towards her, about to attack her, and then she spins around. It's Dee Dee, dressed as Dr. Kettering, and the voice was a recording, even though Dr. Kettering was in the room, just behind them. Weird.
Yeah. When did she record that?
Pre-recorded warnings. Dee Dee attempts to arrest Dr. Boland, even though at this point he hasn't actually committed a crime, and proceeds to search him for the knife by inexplicably looking in his trouser legs. Distracted, Boland then swipes Dee Dee with the knife he is holding in his hand. Hunter leaps in from another room from nowhere, it seems, shoots a vase, and then lets Boland escape, which is his classic MO. Hunter then pursues Boland, who is, for reasons we can't explain, heading up to the top of the building instead of reaching the much easier exit, which was one floor below. Mm-hmm. At the rooftop of the building, Hunter and Boland have a fight, a really inept fight, with Hunter dropping his gun, Boland dropping his knife, a really crap fist fight, then Boland picking up his knife. Inevitably, they end up going higher onto some kind of building scaffolding. Hunter disarms Boland again. Boland bear hugs Hunter. You don't see bear hugs a lot in these days. And then they scramble around, hanging precariously from the rooftop scaffold. The two duke out, both gaining and losing the upper hand. Eventually, they drop down a level. Hunter gets the upper hand, and in a far moment of unintentional hilarity, Boland runs at Hunter, who ducks out of the way, leaving Boland launching himself off the roof of the building to his death.
I laughed so much at that page. It's basically like he's diving into a pool. So,
we hear cars screeching to a halt below us. Hunter says, again, works for me, which doesn't work at all in the context of that scene.
No,
it seems out of place.
Works.
What works for him? How did any of that work out? His partner's been wounded and his suspect has just leapt off a building. How did that work out for anyone?
There's no proof that he's done anything.
Proof of anything. In the epilogue, we see Dee Dee preparing to leave the hospital in a wheelchair after her injury and debating with Hunter how he managed to remain injury-free through the whole investigation. Hunter and Dee Dee share a moment and then agree their partnership will remain. Captain Kane appears from nowhere and says he has plans to the contrary. He proceeds to have a 2 to 3 minute rant at Dee Dee and Hunter about rules, towing the line, behaviour, and makes lots of threats of what will happen if they don't. No mention here that Dr. Bolam was the psychiatrist he hired to end the career of Hunter. Best not mention that. Then, in a really dumb end-of-episode moment, a man tries to steal drugs from the hospital right in front of Dee Dee, Hunter, and Captain Kane. Hunter confronts him. He takes Dee Dee hostage, saying, "Don't move," or she gets it. And then Dee Dee tips her wheelchair backwards, and the criminal is now under the dual gunpoint of Dee Dee and Hunter, in another opening credits moment, and leaves Hunter to deliver his most Dirty Harry moment of the entire show. "Well, punk, you're going to go for it," and scene. We never do discover why the serial killer was choosing Wednesdays.
It's Orange Wednesday. He's a precursor to 2-for-1 Wednesdays. So when they were saying no to him, he's asking them to the cinema, and they wouldn't go with him. That's all I can think of.
That is the show. It's basically Dirty Harry light in every possible way that it can be.
Yeah.
With pretty much nonsensical stuff, right down to even in Dirty Harry, for example, the opening sequence of Dirty Harry in the famous 5 shots are only 6 shots are only 5. That's following a bank robbery where Harry actually goes to lunch and a bank robbery happens, Dirty Harry. So they've basically almost taken it scene for scene out of that. The murder that happens at the beginning is actually a lot more similar to perhaps some of the murders in some of the other Dirty Harry movies and some of the other Clint Eastwood type movies of the era, including Tightrope and things like that.
Yes.
But be under no illusion, this is basically TV version of Dirty Harry. Every mannerism, every statement, every line, everything delivered, the stature, the kind of pose. It's very much in this. And it's one of the Dirty Harry movies. I think it's The Enforcer, has Tyne Daly in it as his sidekick.
Yes, yeah.
And it's pretty much plays out exactly like that in many, many, many ways. Problem with this is that unfortunately he isn't a very good actor for a start. He's got good actors in it. Brian Dennehy's okay, although he's weird in this. But they've got pretty much a no-name actor in this. And the actual show is quite alarmingly violent because it's based on something that was a fairly serious X-rated movie at the end of it all, and X-rated for violence at the time. Dirty Harry is, and be under no illusion, a violent film of the 70s. It's very much of its time, very gritty. You're dealing with some really nasty stuff in there, including serial killers, people shooting from towers. A lot of these things were in and happening around the 70s and 80s in the US. So it was leading into a real history of things that were happening and real brutal murders that were happening in and around that time. So then kind of take an light-hearted 80s approach to that and to try and turn it into a TV show, even though this was shown at 9:00 in the US originally. I think the problem here is that they can't play the seriousness of what they're doing too seriously, and they can't have any real violence in it, and such that they can. You can't have Dirty Harry style violence. So they just allude to that violence all the time. And in doing so, actually make light of the violence that's actually inherent in it. And by doing that, you inevitably end up with a show that's fundamentally at odds with itself. The idea of having the rogue cop that wants to break all the rules is fine, as we saw with TJ Hooker. But here, the idea of Dirty Harry is that he is so despondent by the end of the film, he throws his badge away and he stops being a cop because he can't function in that world. I know there's other sequels, but that's the principle of what happens to Dirty Harry. Here, it's kind of a laugh it off and trap a drug dealer in the lift on your way out. It's not come to a proper resolution for something of this type. And that means that it's quite difficult to get a really good read on this. So while it's shot quite well and it's made quite well, the story in of itself is quite weak. And it's weak because it's borrowing from something that's meant for a completely different target audience and then trying to lighten the load a bit by filling it full of A-Team style shenanigans. And it's not a combination that sits well. It doesn't blend well. The A-Team is the A-Team and Dirty Harry is Dirty Harry, and the two are not going to be mutually compatible, and you can't force them together. And then to try and throw in catchphrases, and again, the works for me is just thrown in to try and make it stick, which it sort of does, but I think it loses it. Now, this show went on for 7 seasons, so it was, and several movies afterwards, so it had some longevity, which seems completely bizarre to me that it was that popular. I actually found the show itself pretty limiting in what it had to offer. The most interesting character in it was Dee Dee, because she's the only one that played her character quite well. Hunter is kind of just Clint Eastwood, really, in a kind of a crap TV version of Clint Eastwood. Every other character in it you've seen in every other cop show. So it offered nothing, and there's no depth to Hunter's character. He is just they try and apply depth to him, but he doesn't have the acting chops to pull any of that off. He is just an expressionless automaton mainly in this, who imitates Clint Eastwood all the time. And for that reason, I only gave this a 5 in my estimation of its story and its characters, because I found both of them were really were at odds with what they were really trying to do. But what about you?
I found it really boring. Despite what you've read there sounds quite exciting. But the problem is that's 93 minutes long, 95 minutes long. And it's just, there's so much dullness in it. There's, every scene seems really drawn out, and it seems to go on forever. And just, I don't know. And the main issue is, as you've rightly pointed out, it's a story told better in the cinema. This is it's a watered down version of those films we were seeing at the time. Tightrope, which is the same year, Sharky's Machine with Burt Reynolds in 1981, Dressed to Kill, all those kind of serial killers, knives, killing women, that sort of thing. That sort of thing. I'm not particularly a fan of all of those films, but you want to watch this story with these kind of with those kind of characters, go watch those, and as you've rightly said, more accurately, go watch Dirty Harry, because this so desperately wants to be that, which is completely out of place for mid 1980s TV. It just doesn't work. Yeah. So my problem with Hunter is that it's got no identity of its own. No, it's a knockoff serial killer story with a glacial pace and no real redeeming features that I could see. Dee Dee's all right, but but as a combo pair, they're not interesting. And Brian Dennehy, I mean, he's so hammy in it. It's ridiculous. That fight is stupid on top of the bill, and he's going to be the killer. I mean, this is a well-worn trope that goes back to programs like Columbo. When you have a guest star, they're the killer. Yeah. So. Okay, that's this. It's weird that they do that, and in doing that, they do what T.J. Hooker didn't do, which have these elements are just happening aside from each other. Whereas here, it's like we've got to have a serial killer, we've got to have a plot, but then the plot is just lifted from things like Dirty Harry and Tightrope and things like that. And so I don't know. I just found it really quite empty. And watching this, I was like, oh God, Lord, when will this finish? I was like about an hour in. I was thinking, why have we got 35 minutes of this left? What's going to happen?
It ran for way too long.
It's way too long. I mean, I know it's 2 parts, but it's what is it? It's about half an hour before they get teamed up. Before anyone notices there's been a murder, that opening murder. I was thinking at the beginning, okay, well, there's been a murder, so we'll see what goes on. And then it's just bank shenanigans, which, as you rightly point out, is just lifted from Dirty Harry. Yeah. I gave it a 4 because I found it dull as dishwater, hackneyed and cliched. Even when it came out, I thought this was wrong thing for the wrong audience in the wrong place, and it's just it's. I didn't understand I understood what they were going for, but as you said, you can't put a team like No One Dies really in shootouts. And like you said, he's always shooting vases or wood paneling or anything but people. You can't have that, and then cars flipping and that kind of A-team like shenanigans with the darkness of a serial killer going around knifing women. No,
it's very odds. Doesn't work for that.
No. And so I thought this was, and like you said, he's not a particularly redeeming lead man.
No,
he just doesn't have anything to carry it. So no, I didn't particularly enjoy Hunter. So like I said, I gave it a 4. So that's what I gave it.
Well, there we go. The story and characters very heavily fleshed out. And after all of that fleshing and all of that Brian Dennehy going, shut up, we find that Hunter is trailing TJ Hooker by a fair margin there. So TJ Hooker's got it in the bag at the minute. Yeah. So let's leave our story and characters behind, and we'll move on to our next item. And so without further ado, let's talk about the costumes and sets of TJ Hooker.
Okay. Is there much to say about the costumes here? I mean, the costume designer is Nolan Miller. He goes back. He started out on Burke's Law in 1965. So he'd worked on things like Heart to Heart, Charlie's Angels, and loads of other TV shows at the time. Clearly a costume designer that was obviously working on plenty of these kind of straight, TV shows, and giving people what they needed to wear. There's nothing out of the ordinary here as well. Bar Romano's pants, which I think are worth a mention of their own. Monogram pants. That's a brave choice. And his white polo neck ensemble in the bar scene. But I think that's actually quite good characterization for Romano's character, for what he is. So, he's just a bit of a show off. He's always trying it with the ladies and stuff. So it kind of works. Everyone else is just very normal. It's very downplayed. It goes for a quite real feel. It's just people are just dressed. There's no kind of showiness to anyone, really. The recruits, when they're in, it's not like they're wearing like designer gear. They're just in a sort of, joggers and sort of sweatpants and sweatshirts. When they're in the academy, they're in uniforms when on patrol. It all looks pretty realistic, I guess. Whit and Travis, blue collar sort of outfits, just workers' outfits. They've got a jacket. There's nothing looks out of place. Everything's down to earth. And I think that it's the sets similar in style. There's lots of shooting outside on the streets. The interiors feel pretty realistic. The bar, not sure, maybe the house was a bit sterile, and the restaurant, I'm not sure about those, but mostly it just feels like a place that's been shot. I'm sure some of this was on the back lot. The academy's not shown very much. There's a big room where they all sleep. The dorm room and the corridor where they make the phone call. So it would have been suited to that. But the outside, seems okay. There's some shots of that. It also just seems functional. So in terms of costumes and sets, they've gone for a very basic look to the show, and it works. It gives it a grounding in reality, which worked for me. It does exactly what it sets out to do. Nothing throughout this seemed off. The only off bit was why she was in bed with silk sheets with nearly her boobs hanging out, which is kind of weird. I understand, but it seemed very odd. So because it works, because it supports the show in a decent way, I gave this a 6. What did you think?
Okay.
Do you think anything different?
Yeah, apart from TJ Hooker's uniforms being at least one size too tight.
Yeah, well, don't mean he couldn't wear. He was in them. There was obviously some corset work going on, but
it's just packed into them like a
come on, corset hold sausage, together.
But yeah, most of the outfits are in keeping with the thematic of the show. So, the gritty urban cliched bad guys are wearing, dirty clothes in bad cars and sort of those kind of beanie hats and things like that. Always in pairs, aren't there, the bad guys in these things? There's always two. They're always in a crap car. There's always the clear lines are, the poor are baddies, or the poor people baddies. Cops and middle income, cops' wives and things, slightly better dressed. Higher ups are always in suits. It's a very readable interplay. Clear lines being drawn. You know who the cops are because they're the ones in the cop uniforms, in the cop cars, making copy things, saying cop type things. The sets I thought in TJ Hooker were a little bit weaker because a lot of it's set in a field when they're running around in fields. Yeah,
there is that, but yeah.
And there's the bar, there's the kind of crappy classroom. The various external shots, of course. So I suppose they're all Los Angeles, aren't they? So, and it has that, it's not quite as gritty as Hunters look, generally speaking, but there still is moments of grittiness in it. So when sometimes you'll see in TJ Hooker, for example, when they're driving through some of the more nefarious parts of Los Angeles, albeit that they were doing that clearly at 4 a.m. or something, in the background, you'll see posters for XXX cinemas and things like that. So, in a sense, they're grounding it in a city of where it's meant to be, although it's kind of nondescript city in it, but it's where it's meant to be. So there is that. I think they're limited by the action that happens in this. So most of the police training happens at the training bit. Most of the conversations happen in a bar or restaurant or in somebody's house. And then, even to the point when the main 2 robberies are outside restaurants or in a burger joint. It's just, they're obsessed with food distribution in this.
Well, who would?
But that said, they are, in terms of the costumes all work. There's nothing outlandish or crazy. They do kind of work for what they are. And it is its own thing. It is, the idea of that police academy, of police uniforms and stuff like that. This, again, I say, predates Police Academy, the film, by some couple of years. So, and that look of the police all standing in a row and all of that, that is something that is quite televisual. Most people don't think of the training grounds of the police force and things like that, like an army sort of. And I suppose it's kind of worked in that. So I actually also gave it a 6 for its costumes and its sets, because there's nothing special about them, but there's nothing terrible about them. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Okay, well, then let me tell you a little bit about the costumes of our friend, Mr. Hunter. Rick, to you and me. So the sets here, the costumes, were by Kent Warner. He actually died in 1984, so that's the same year that this came out. I'm not sure what happened there. And I suppose what you can really say, since the pilot show screams kind of an 80s realism vibe, you're not going to see any stylish choices. They try and pretty much follow the grubby realism aesthetic of Dirty Harry, albeit that was in the 70s, so a slightly updated, more shoulder pads variety, but still very much Dallas. It's Dynasty meets sort of the A-Team meets that kind of vibe, that kind of era. Weirdly, there's also a peculiar penchant for country and western in this. So there's an entire strand of country and western garb, cowboy hats, cowboy boots, country and western bars, very short skirts, women on riding mechanical bulls in short skirts, all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of that in it. So your victims are generally women who frequent bars and who like to have fun. So I guess in the trope of this, if you're a single woman and you're fairly flirtatious, you are destined to be murdered and attacked. And if you happen to work in a country and western bar, you're more susceptible than ever, because that seems to be the place where men and women are extra flirty, because country and western folk must be flirtier than usual. But they wear that kind of stuff. So, and it's not unusual to see that in this kind of vibe. And if you think that kind of was it McLeod, which was I think set, and he was I think McLeod was a western cowboy type cop that had come into the city. It's very much borrowing from that in terms of its victims. Hunter wears rumpled jackets, faded jeans. He's meant to be a plainclothes detective, but he wears kind of jeans, jackets. He wears Dirty Harry-esque stuff, but he's dressed himself from TK Maxx as opposed to somewhere a bit more classy, because Dirty Harry's kind of in suit jackets and sort of suits, and really 70s suits with elbow pads that he wears, which, by the way, later in the season, Hunter does wear a jacket with elbow pads in exact mimicry.
Of course he does.
He carries that kind of world weariness with all of his clothes, so he looks like he's never looked like he's dressed for anything other than just nothing. He's very, very much plainclothes detective with maybe the sports jacket. McCall mixes practical detective attire with proper full, over the knee skirts and more formal dress with dressing like what looked like an escapee from a Prince music video at a certain point. But she mixes up between, so hookers in this world dress like Wonder Woman for some reason, and pimps all dress exactly and sound exactly like pimps do, because they're lifted. As you rightly point out, because this has no identity of its own, they've lifted the two pimp characters directly from Dirty Harry, because they're pretty much identical, including, and also the pimp character that's in the Magnum Force. So the pimp character that's in Magnum Force as well, because he's one that gets shot near the start. They've principally lifted them out of there and put them straight in here.
Yeah. They're
giving them an eye patch, but... Yeah,
they're just cliched pimp characters. That's all they are.
Yeah, completely. So they're dressed like stereotypes. So they're not, at least what you can say about the bad guys in TJ Hooker is that they were just dressed like people who just didn't have a lot of money. They were just dressed like down and outs, but poor. They're dressed like characters from a Dirty Harry movie. So it's almost like Dirty Harry costume, sort of costume party. Anyway, so that's the rest of the clothes, as you can imagine, all fit in the area. There's a lot of big hair in there, shoulder pads. Dee Dee's hair goes from being big to bigger at certain points. His hair is inexplicable in the first pilot show. It looks like an eagle has landed on his head at certain points. His hair is a bird.
Cage, isn't he?
He is. His hair is a bird. He actually gets shortened in later episodes, but his hair is a bird in this. And that's kind of because they're the principal characters. The Captain Kane, he's just in a tightly wound suit, so he's just he is that expression, and it's that poor people in this. Not so much the poor people, but the victims are young people having fun in bars, and women who dress arguably provocatively, but in this they're really just dressing like people who like country and western music. The cops dress in either inappropriate attire or anything they like, because they kind of dress down. And the rest of it's either suits or, important people in suits. And that's kind of how it plays, because that's exactly how it plays in Dirty Harry. Exactly. As for the sets, all of the action here takes place on real LA streets. So there's no sound stages, grimy alleys, crumbling apartments, diners, and the classic police precinct sort of set that you've seen in a million things before. I think it was the decision that they did everything on location here. So it gives it that kind of street level authenticity, which I think it would have appealed to the director of the episode who did all of the AD work on Mean Streets. So it very much certainly in the evenings, in the darkness in this, looks a lot like Mean Streets. So the streets are played for mean in this. They're not look like nice places to be, what you see of them. So you kind of get that smoggy late night tension when it's there. The rest of it's kind of Los Angeles with some of the gloss taken off, but that's pretty much it's shot for shot, street for street, cars pulled up in the streets. He cannot park his car straight, by the way. But so you see all of those things, and the murder that happens in kind of a suburban house. So it's not really clear Exactly, and Dee Dee lives in kind of an apartment block, so it's kind of nondescript. This is just the life of people that live in Los Angeles. It's not played for any kind of anything other than they should go for a kind of a street level of reality. Problem with that is that because it's those sets, it's just LA as the backdrop, so it doesn't really add anything to it. San Francisco adds a lot to the chases in Dirty Harry because it's all hilly in there, so the cars are going up and flying about on the hills, and there's lots of tiny little roads in there. Los Angeles is just pretty much grid-based, so it's, there's cars screech around corners, but they always end up flying off fences and things like that in the middle of nowhere. He obviously does drive a couple of different cars. He has a 1977 Dodge Monaco and a 1970 Ford LTD. But because he's constantly getting in wrecks, they just kind of that becomes the running joke. It's nothing really there. So the problem here is that the costumes and sets, there are no costumes other than from Dirty Harry and the dress up of Dirty Harry. And the set is just Los Angeles. Now, admittedly, they've done it quite well in the way they've done that, but it is just Los Angeles. There's no thrills here. There's nothing really great about any of it. So I gave it a 4 for its costume sets because I just think it lacked any imagination that would have made it interesting and just dressed them all up like people from another film. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've not got much to add to that. I mean, my first note is that they managed to raid the hooker's room in the back lot for this one because it's just like, oh, for God's sake, that's all. Dee Dee turns up, there's the prostitutes. It's just wear proper clothes or wear clothes that it's just this kind of program. And like you said, if you're an undercover cop, a female undercover cop, you have to be a prostitute. That's your only role, all you can ever be. And so I was like, okay, and it was just like the pimps. It's like, oh my God, Hunter's ensemble. It resembles someone going for boring and nondescript, which, okay, but it's not interesting. It's boring and nondescript. No. And he just looks like he should be, wandering around a shopping mall in 1984 or something like that. It just looks like that. There's no sense that he's a cop or anything. Dee Dee's get a bit better as it goes on, but nothing really interesting. There's nothing to comment on. I just didn't think with the characters. It's there's, like you said, there's a penchant for a penchant. I don't know how to pronounce that. For country and western for some reason, but again, doesn't really add anything. None of the outfits, none of the costumes add anything to the characters. They don't say anything about them. As stupid as Romano's pants are in T.J. Hooker, they say something about him. That's an interest. It's like, okay, so there's something there. Sets wise, like you said, it's just LA. It's just LA.
Yeah.
Some of it's shot in quite interesting ways, but it's a bit boring. It's a bit flat and boring all the time, and that's LA, I suppose. And I think you noted it there that although this is LA, there's no sense of continuity of location or place to it, so it doesn't feel connected anywhere. Her place, where does she live? Who are these old people? Is she living in some like old retirement home complex? It's very strange. So yeah, I gave it a 4 as well because I didn't really get anything from the costumes and sets. They were just there because they needed to exist. They all had to have clothes on, and it needed to exist somewhere.
And it's fundamentally a problem as well. And the problem is that the investigation is tailored around a certain type of clothing. So the country western clothing, the boots, the cowboy hats, and it's all about that.
Yep.
But by making everything else completely flat and lifeless, it means that they have no clue. So when they're investigating, there's nothing to investigate. And that really is a problem in this because as you watch the show, you realize they actually just bumble around, not doing anything, not solving anything, not getting any evidence, and just piecing things together from the piecemeal threads that they have. And that's because there's nothing descriptive about anything. So, it is a crime scene where nobody can describe anything because there's nothing to describe. And that's that's really the key to it. So, yeah, I think, 2 4s. It's not doing well, is it, Hunter? It's getting a proper slap in here.
Yeah.
Currently it's getting fist beaten by TJ Hooker. He's
getting shot on.
Doing so well. He is getting shot on. He is getting shattered. Okay, well, let's take a step away from the costumes and sets then and move on to our next item. And that is, of course, the music and sound effects of both of these things. And, well, start by telling us what's it like to listen to the soundtrack of TJ Hooker.
Well, now here's the thing. So the music here is composed by Mark Snow. You may remember Mark Snow. He did, and I found this great. When I started to look into Mark Snow, he did the theme tune to Heart to Heart.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
He's worked on other stuff, but the probably one you probably know from Mark Snow for is he did the theme to the X-Files.
All right, okay.
So and he also shared a room with Michael Kamen when they were at sort of school together or something, or when they were at graduate school after. So yeah, I was quite amazed that this was Mark Snow. It was like, when Mark Snow, his X-Files, Millennium, Smallville, all those sort of popular shows of 90s and early noughts, and then you realise, he did loads of stuff back around in the early 80s and stuff. And he did this. So it's Mark Snow. This is in a time when, obviously, before his iconic X-Files theme tune, but the main theme to this, it's okay. It's about the best I can say. It's very of its time. Lots of brass and fanfares to get us going into early 80s TV mode. You know what you're going to listen to when you hear this. I can't help but feel that this was an attempt at, I don't know if it came before or after, but it's around the same time, it's the same year, trying to do something similar to Cagney and Lacey. Yeah,
it's very similar. It's heavily influenced.
And I think that's what it is, because obviously that was Bill Conti and Quincy. Yeah, it's that kind of, that sort of theme. And I've listened to it today. I've listened to it about 3 or 4 times today. And if you asked me to hum it right now, I couldn't do it. In fact, all I can hear is Quincy and Cagney and Lacey. There's a knack to making something memorable, and this doesn't do that. When I heard it, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. And then I instantly forgot it. It's like, gone. So I guess it's nothing special. It does its job. We're in TJ Hooker land, okay. The incidental music for this, usual for the time. Slow and mysterious when we're in the company of Whit and Travis, menacing, low tones, low hums, lots of do-do-do-do-do, it's like, all that kind of thing, yeah. Soft and pleasant when Hooker and his wife are together, all goes a bit nice, like, something nice in the background. There's not, it's not used in every scene, which I'm always a fan of when there's conversations going on, and they use sort of music in the background, like in the bar and stuff. And so when some of the conversations are going on, we don't need music, and I think it works quite well. The action scenes use a variation of the main theme. It's a bit more pace to it, but it's all very forgettable. I could not hum you one piece of music from this if you held me down tied me down to bed and said you got to shoot me. You have to shoot me because I can't remember any. So nothing really stuck out for this. Sound effects, very much diegetic with little feeling out of place. There's not, apart from TJ Hooker's recording of slogans, gymnasium slogans, but it's all very much, it's in the world. They've not gone into any sort of oddness or weirdness or, where people, even when he has the Nam flashback, I don't think there's much in the way of sort of sound effects are sort of like, you could have gone all sort of, and they could have done that, but they don't. They kind of keep it in world, I think. The gunshots in this, they're quite low in the mix, not overly loud or over the top. Apart from the shot when it cuts, which gives the shotguns a nice meaty boom when they're at the shooting range shooting them, because the normal guns is like and then the shot boom boom. There's a nice, it's good. That actually was like, oh, okay, that works quite well, because I don't think I've ever heard a shotgun being fired, but I imagine it has a mightier boom than a small pistol.
It's very loud.
Yeah, and so they kind of do manage to sort of capture that or demonstrate that somehow. And, even with the guns which are shot out in the world when they happen, they're okay. We'll come to Hunter's gunshots in a bit. But the only thing I really noticed in this, in terms of the sound effects, as I mentioned in the story, and it's the ADR in some of the scenes was quite obvious. So that's the added dialogue recording where they record it, and didn't mimic, match it to the lines because they've not got it in thing if you don't know what that is. I guess it's to be accepted at the time, but it's not mixed very well. It's clear that those people are not saying the words coming out of their mouth at that time. So this was very sort of ordinary. The theme tune didn't stick in my head. There's nothing too groundbreaking of note here. Nothing too egregious either. They could have, done bad in some places, but they've just kept it down the line. I gave it a 5 because it just feels, that's what it is. It's very average. It's very sort of what was said about the show itself, in keeping with the rest of the show. Nothing particularly draws attention to itself. And that's what I thought about the music and sound effects of TJ Hooker. Gave it a 5. What did you think?
Principally the same, actually. I think in a sea of lots and lots of 80s shows, with lots and lots of 80s shows, music and catchy music at that, it didn't stand out.
No, it doesn't.
It's not a great opening sequence to the show anyway, but it doesn't really stand out that much. It is pretty forgettable. It has that classic sort of build up, and then it has the kind of strings bit, very much like Quincy does and a few of the others. It's certainly of its type.
Yeah.
But as with all of the incidental music all the way through, which is neither offensive nor inoffensive, it suits a TV drama of this type. It's perfectly suitable for what it is. It's not going to. You don't really notice it, in fact. So it kind of does its job. It just fills in that little bit of space and sets some of the tone, when there's long pauses on Shatner's face, if he's contemplating something or something like that, you do get that kind of, dun, dun, an end of scene or an end of an act. You'll get that kind of that's the formula. But as I said, the interesting thing here was who did the composing. And of course, they went on to some amazing other stuff. It's not an offensive opening gambit. It's sort of, it does, at least it's got, TJ Hooker, it sort of sets out where it is. It's not, I don't know, it's not as heroic as, and I think that's good because he isn't a hero in this, remember. He's actually quite the troubled guy. So it doesn't doesn't play the hero fanfare as such. It's more just of a kind of a bit meandering, action music, action scenes, stuff's going to happen. It's about cops. But it doesn't, it could have started with, it could have started like Police Squad, couldn't it? With the police sirens could have been like that. But it doesn't. It could have gone for the Cagney and Lacey style stuff, but you've got to be, you're in dangerous territory if you're going to head up towards that. So it's perfectly adequate. Sound effects wise, again, I thought the gun noises were a little bit gated in this, a little bit muted. So which kind of works, but the cutoff was a bit too sudden. So they're kind of more pops than kabooms, which sort of suits the sentiment of the show. And the shotguns, they are definitely that peeps, and where they're just running and shooting shotguns off, it is quite loud. And why don't they use them later? Anyway, but like I said, it's neither offensive nor inoffensive. What it isn't is the sound effects aren't something that are going to deafen you every time there's a shootout or anything like that. And there's quite a lot of gunshots in this for a show of this time. Remember that there's lots of people getting murdered especially the old couple outside the restaurant. It's a couple of blasts right there. So, and you're not going to see blood and guts or anything like that. So there's no squib sounds, there's no gurgling and dying or anything like that. The car screeching sounds are the car screeching sounds that I think must just come off the same CD as all of them.
Yes.
So there's nothing particularly offensive there. I thought that it was just about as average a soundscape of a TV show as you could get. So I gave it a 5 straight down the line because it's just right in the middle. It's neither good nor bad. It's not memorable. And I suppose that's the one thing it needs to be, is memorable. But other than that, it's perfectly serviced for the rest of the show. So 5. I
would say, just to sort of come back to you mentioned at the beginning, not being, I quite like the fact that it didn't start off with the theme tune. There was a pause where they come running over the hill, don't there, the cadets, and then the theme tune kind of comes in. I quite like that kind of quiet opening, just that little moment before it kind of came in. But that was just me. But I still give it a 5. It's a 5. It's a 5 all day long.
Well, if we go from the 5s of TJ Hooker and we then head to obviously Hunter territory.
For me.
We're confronted with the mighty Mike Post. Now, Mike Post is kind of king of the 80s TV themes. If you've heard the A-Team amongst loads of others, then you're going to have heard a Mike Post theme. And of course, probably one of the most famous ever is the A-Team. Now, the guy can compose, and he composes this stuff particularly well. Now, given that this show is, and let's just take a roll back. So this is fundamentally based on Dirty Harry, as we've said. Dirty Harry has a very famous soundtrack by Lalo Schifrin, which is a really amazing soundtrack, but absolutely of a type.
Yeah.
And there was no way that they were going to be able to do that for an 80s show because it's firmly implanted in the 70s, the Lalo Schifrin music.
Yeah.
And it's got that famous it's a great soundtrack for Dirty Harry, absolutely amazing. But you weren't going to be able to lift that, because if you did lift that, you would have may as well have called the TV show Dirty Harry, because everyone would have known. So
Dirty Hunter.
Dirty Hunter. So what you Dirty Hunter? What they'd have had to do is get they've got Mike Post in, and obviously Mike Post is the stalwart for these kind of shows with this kind of producer as well, because obviously this is the producer, Lupo is the producer of the A-Team. So it goes to Mike Post, and Mike Post listens to it, and he creates an interesting theme that's actually quite bold, quite loud, totally suited to a buddy cop show, which this isn't. So this if this was Hunter and Dee Dee, or it was Dempsey and Makepeace, or it was anything like that, even I would say, dare I say, Starsky and Hutch, but maybe not so much that far back. But if it was a cop show in the 80s where there was a buddy, a woman and a cop, and they were doing everything that these two don't do in a place where in fact, it'd have to be not this show. This would be a perfectly suitable theme for that. As it stands, it feels at odds with the show. That's not to say it isn't great, because it's good. It's got a really nice middle eight and a really catchy bit in it. So it's got that nice. It's got the Mike Post edge, and it brings a lot of swagger to that opening sequence, which the opening sequence is rubbish for Hunter. No, it is rubbish. It's just lots of stills and crappy bits of things that make no sense anyway, topped with him going, works for me at the end for no reason whatsoever. That doesn't play at any point, by the way. So, but it's got that kind of nice, it's very much in keeping with the orchestral dynamic of all Mike Post music. So if you think of the instruments in the A-Team music, they are the same that are in this. So it's composed from the same stock. Now, I thought it's a particularly good theme. Hunter is quite catchy and memorable, like all Mike Post themes are. When you hear it, and eventually you're going to get a little bit's going to stick in your mind, because that's what he was good at. In the same way that we had Ronnie Hazelhurst, Mike Post is America's Ronnie Hazelhurst. He had a knack of having little bits of theme. You might not remember the whole thing, but there'll be a little bit of Hunter that you remember. And it's no doubt about it. Whether you get the na-na-na-na or you get the da-da-da-da-da, you're going to remember it. So I thought the theme was successful on a show that it wasn't suited to, but the theme was actually pretty good. And the music throughout is, other than that, it's just kind of played for TV kicks. So it's no different really to the background music of a bit that there's a heavy component of country and western at certain points, but it's no more effective in the background than TJ Hooker's is. It's just there and completely forgettable. You wouldn't even really acknowledge some of it. So other than that theme, the music in there is neither here nor there, apart from the fact that the key sensibility of this is that country and western fans are being murdered, and that will links them together. So that's the only other musical trope in it. Like I said, theme good, wrong show. Soundscapes in the show, well, the gunshots are really loud, really. But it's Dirty Harry loud. He's not, at certain points he's not firing a Magnum, but it's a Magnum sound, or the TV show Magnum. No guns actually sound like that for real. So they just sound like little pops, little pop, pop, pop. They don't sound like anything like that. Even a 45 Magnum, which I have fired, sounds nothing like that. It is a bit more kaboomy. It's just big bullets. But in this, he's ineffective. He doesn't shoot that much, thankfully, because he misses everything anyway. And so more often than not, you're just seeing the things he shoots. Like you'll see windscreen bullets. So you'll see a car dint shoot, a hole in a car side. Or you'll see a vase smash. He doesn't actually shoot anyone in the entire show.
Nope.
Dee Dee does. I think she shoots the guy in the fountain with her pistol, which is, again, sort of a pow pow.
She shoots the pimp as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she does. So there's more shooting from her, but his gun is this supposedly super. He's got one point, he's definitely holding a Desert Eagle, which are loud. If you've seen Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, you've seen a Desert Eagle going off. It's pretty loud. So other than the gun sound effects, which are kind of odd, the screeching tires, straight out of the screeching tires, playbook for this kind of show, all the echoey footsteps you get in back alleys, straight from the Foley editor, the Foley sounds from all these shows. So, and there's a sort of ambient hum of downtown LA at certain points, which is kind of interesting because they've clearly just recorded some, LA sounds in the background, but it's not very subtle. So the sound design kind of wants you to be more on edge than you will be. And obviously there's this weird sound effect. Whenever you see the killer, you get the kind of killer sound. That's lifted straight from the Clint Eastwood movies of this type. When you see the killer in Tightrope, for example, you see him by his boots and you see him by the weapon. And every time you see it, you get this kind of wheew sound, which is exactly what they lift for this. So it's, again, borrowing its key tropes and soundscapes from something completely different. And I suppose it's not, it's brazen about it. So the only interesting thing about the whole music and sound effects for me was this opening music, because it is quite catchy, but it doesn't suit this show, but it is quite catchy. So I gave it six for the music, really. But I'd never really scored it for its sound effects. They didn't factor into it, so it's 6 really for me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I recognise the theme tune. This theme tune, like you rightly say, doesn't fit this story. I mean, if you're talking about a story about someone going around murdering women, then this kind of it's like that's completely at odds. What you're making here, you're not making this show that this sounds like. So it's good, but it doesn't fit. The sound effects, I didn't like those gunshots were really recognisable. The thing with TJ Hooker's gunshots is they were just sounded like gunshots and a bit gated, but I didn't recognise them. Here, I recognised those sound effects. I'd heard them 1,000 times before in 1,000 shows like this. That kind of almost muffled gunshot sounds that are just used in everything. They don't sound like they're coming from the guns that are being fired because they all sound the same and all guns are different. It's like it's all over the place. And ironically, the only shot that he makes is shooting the tire out with a shotgun at pace on a moving target from behind at a straight angle. I don't even know how he does that. You can't hit anything else though, like 6 feet away from him. But yeah, so that annoyed me. So the theme tune was up there, but the sound effects I think got on my nerves. So they kind of thingied, and that scream when Brian Dennehy went off the building was laughable. Hey! Exactly. I'm a wizard, mind you. It's just like, what was that? So it pulled it down to a 5 for me.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Because I think the sound effects were dreadful through this, and they undercut the decent theme.
Well, that's fair enough, I think. Well, oh, goodness me. I mean, Hunter, what's happening, mate? Goodness me. It doesn't work for you, clearly. I mean, it absolutely isn't working for you, being shat on massively here.
Quite literally.
Well, and okay, so, it's the shows that have got relatively uninteresting characters versus the ones slightly interesting. It's an interesting, but as we start to pick this apart, you can see where the problems are, can't you, as you do this? And
yeah, very much
music
so.
And sound effects, I thought, might be the only one where they had a kind of equilibrium, and it's more equal than the others, but still, it's not. Still, no one's going to be challenging TJ Hooker at the moment, are they? So, well, let's leave that one behind. We've listened enough to those sound effects and the music. Let's now take a sneaky look at the cinematography or special effects. Well, both really, but cinematography probably mainly in these. Starting with you and TJ Hooker.
Okay. I've kind of used stunt work instead of special effects, I think.
Yeah, same difference, yeah.
So I'll mention the stunt work in here, sort of thing. So anyway, for the majority of this, we're in very familiar TV territory. Okay, this was directed by Cliff Bowl. Now, at the time, he had directed episodes of Heart to Heart, Charlie's Angels, BJ and the Bear, V, The Fall Guy, $6 Million Man. This was someone who was very experienced in the ways of shooting these TV serials, and it shows. Yeah. This was an experience to my hands. I read somewhere as well that this started filming this was aired 2 months after Wrath of Khan or something. So I think it was a condensed period of time.
Yeah, it must be, yeah.
So, to get this out. And I think it probably was knowing that this was a replacement show. I think this was like, we need to get this on, get this going, up and running, get this shot. So you put it in Cliff Bowl's hands, who's clearly a safe pair of hands to get this turned around and shot in time. Now, I quite like the opening shot of the recruits coming, running over the hill, sort of with just the sound effects from that and getting sort of, I quite like that. And then so there's a couple of other shots, then there's a low shot of them running around the camera. I quite like that. I always like those kind of low shots where people avoid the camera. I don't know, there's something about those things that I kind of like. And indeed, from time to time, there are some nicely framed shots in this. It usually involves... there's nicely framed shots in this. It's usually revolving around someone pointing something at the camera. Okay? Yeah. This is first shown with Hooker pointing into the screen when he's having a go at the recruits right at the very beginning. He says, I can't remember what he says, but he's like, he's pointing. But then there's quite a lot of shots of guns pointed into the screen. Whether it's when the couple get killed, there's the sort of close-up of the gun being shot. This culminates when Hooker shoots Wit at the end as the car is barreling down on him. And there's a shot, which, it's a very... very sort of archetypal shot right down the barrel of the gun at William Shatner, but it's well framed and it's well shot. It looks good. I like that kind of shot. So, and it's like, TJ Hooker doing his thing. And I think that's quite good. There's also some good tracking shots throughout the show as well. The camera's not static. There's quite a lot of movement on the camera, like with Hooker. When he's doing the opening parade, talking to them, it's tracking back and forth with him. The training sequences, it moves around with them a bit. The use of exteriors is good. Lots of natural light used for lighting the scene. So, this, you can tell it's been shot at pace. And they've gone for make of what we can. But in obviously Cliff Bowles' hands, it works. Some of the interior sets seem a bit overlit. So they're very flat. The interior of the house where he comes to see his kids and he has his conversation with his ex-wife, the dormitory, it's all very flat. There's no shadows. I couldn't, it's just very, very lit. But it is what it is. But there's some other little nice bits as well, like that close-up of the gun being loaded to introduce Wit. I think that's quite a nice way to introduce that character. It's like just loading up a gun because he's going to go off and do criminal stuff. There's like little nice one-off moments in this. There's a bit of thought every now and again in this, which, most of it is shot as you'd expect it to. Conversations are usually shot, reverse shot, medium close-ups, nothing too major going on. The full body shot of Romano in his pants is probably a bit too much, and probably no one wanted that, but there you go.
I was getting stinging Dune vibes from that.
But the nighttime stuff, like you said, it's probably shot 4 a.m, but it looks good because it's, the good camera. They've obviously got camera mounts on the police cars as they're riding around because they're filming through the front windscreen, and it's clearly not green screened or anything. They are riding around in those places. So that gives a nice atmosphere to the roads, all lit with the street lights and neon stuff. And as you said, the things in the background, the exterior of like the sort of 7-Eleven or the gas stations and stuff, or the things like that they go to, they look a bit grungy and horrible, but it kind of works. And I like the way this was shot. I had a quite nice feel to it. It's perfectly serviceable, like I said. It's easy to read, well shot, edited. There's also a nice, really quick, almost blink and you miss it interior of the car shot at the end, which as it flips over as the bullets are hitting the windscreen, as Hooker shooting at Witch, I thought was quite nice. In terms of how it's shot, it's standard TV stuff with, I think we've said this about other shows which we've looked at, standard kind of TV 80 stuff, but with the odd little moment of something. That's an interesting shot. That's quite a nice little bit there. In terms of the stunts, there's some, the stuntmen, there's a small explosion at the end, but the problem with this is that it's terrible for not hiding the stuntmen. I mean, it's really bad, and that I think that comes from the pace at which this was shot. I think if they'd have had more time, they would have gone back and gone, no, you need to look away from the camera. We can't see your face. And so the rooftop sequence is genuinely laughable when everybody's replaced by a stuntman. So that is a bit of a shame because it does take you out of it a bit and very of the time. But, I thought this was pretty well shot, well put together, solid TV. I wasn't expecting it. I thought it was going to be a bit more hokey, but it's solid. And like you said, whenever Shatner's on screen, it's watchable. He's got watchable mannerisms and what have you. I actually gave this a 7 because I thought this was actually worked pretty well in terms of how it's shot. I think maybe drop it to a 6 because of the stuntmen, but I'm going to stick with a 7 for it. What did you think?
I agree, actually. I thought this was really nicely shot. I thought there was really good use of colour in this because you're dealing with a lot of blue uniforms. So, it could have just been lots of that. I thought the actual colour and the way they've obviously it's shot in Los Angeles. So, but there's a good use of the tonality of Los Angeles there. It's not everything's shot at the same time of day. For example, you've got some in the evening, there's clearly some in the morning. So you've got a variation of the tone of the daytime, which is quite nice. The good use of colour internally as well. The internal scenes, the bar scenes was actually really nicely lit, even though it was weirdly shot. It was nicely lit.
Yeah, it's badly blocked out terribly, but nicely lit.
And that's the odd thing, because some of the blocking in this was really good, because when you're dealing with lots of cast, which there are in this, you've got to really manage your blocking, because obviously no one wants to block TJ Hooker too much because he's the star. So he has to appear. So he often appears central frame, mid close up, or both, or he often leaps into the frame from the outside and just sort of then takes over the frame. So there's a lot of that goes on in this. But when the other characters are talking, they're actually normally, apart from it's shot to economy, this. So that's why you end up with 16 people in one shot at one point, because they're just shooting to economy. They need to convey a scene quickly, get everyone in it, and get them all on one phone. It's done that way. And that's just they're using their budget pretty effectively to just get, you don't need to, could have just done that with one person, but why not have them all in it? So, but they blocked out those sequences pretty well. When they're doing the shot reverse shot, when there's moments where it's moments of contemplation for TJ Hooker, and there's a moment when he sees the news about his court case. There's moments when he's sort of sat on his own, or the moment when he's talking at the bar. Those actually are quite nicely lit and shadowed. And then when the contrast to that comes, always when you see the bad guys who are almost permanently in half shadow, always shot through more often than not through the windscreen of a car or inside of their car. You only ever really see them at home once or twice, and even then it's grubby and downbeat and not very nice. And I think at nighttime as well, initially. So the idea here is the light and the dark nature of it is coming into play. And I like this idea that there are the dark things of the night, which that sounds really cliche, but I mean is the criminality that seems to be the thing of the night is now happening in the day. And that's kind of what they're saying. They ring up and say, all these things are happening in the day. All these crimes happen in the day. They're not people creeping around at night, apart from the people getting shot, obviously, in that. But even the robbery is in the day in the end. So the whole point of this is that the criminality element is coming out of the shadows and into this sort of lighter play. And that plays out in the way that it's lit and that interplay between the two states. And I think that makes it quite interesting because they shoot it that way and it's very subtle and it's done on a budget, but it's there. It's undeniably there. So as it progresses, the bad guys come out of the dark and out of their shadowy realm and they're then trying, in broad daylight, have a shootout. I found that really quite interesting for a show of this type. And it's clearly been thought about because that's the kind of nature of this show. So I really like that about it. And the stunt work, well, it's going to be... that's the only letdown, is that the stunt work is obviously stuntmen taking over the roles of the people in it. And I suspect that's a health and safety thing. There's probably a whole bunch of reasons why. And Shatner, at this point, he's, I don't know how old he was, but...
I don't remember the use of stuntmen. That's fine sort of thing. It's just, like I said, I think it's the pace at which they had to film. They probably just didn't have time to film it again to make it less obvious.
I think it's more the choice of stunt that haunts them a bit here. I mean, I don't know why they chose to have not just train Shatner and people to do the fight scenes themselves. Shatner's he's been in loads of fights in Star Trek, for example. He's not unused to fighting on set unless he just didn't want to. And the younger guys, I'm pretty sure could have put in the effort. So I'm just not sure what the realities are. But maybe I think you're right. I think probably you're talking second unit. So all of the stars and stuff were simply shot their bits. They were done. Get the second unit guys in, get them dressed up like the stars, and just shoot all the bits that they're not available for because it keeps the budget down.
Yeah.
But even with those, and obviously the shot at the end where Shatner's shooting at the car, it is quite nicely done. It is quite a bold stunt to have someone drive at somebody and then leap out the way and all of that, and it is quite nicely done. And of course, the guy in the car is dead as well, and he sort of rolls over dead in the car, which is quite nice. Unusual to see that on these kind of TV shows, I have to say as well. So I quite liked what they'd set out to do in the way they did it. So I gave it an 8 because I was quite impressed with the way it was way it was done. It's not unusual for its type, but there's some nice things being done in there which I think could easily be lost in there if you just have to pick away a little bit and you start to see it. And I was quite impressed with that. Okay, well. Then I suppose we need to look at Hunter, really.
Yeah, we do.
So, I mean, we've said it like a million times. Hunter was, it's got that unmistakable 80s cop show feel, but it's grounded in Dirty Harry. So the cinematography is at odds with its entire thematic. Weirdly, this was handled by somebody called Jacques Marquette. Jacques Marquette is the guy that did the cinematography for The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, believe it or not.
Wow, okay.
Amongst many other credits, including Hardcastle and McCormick, which shows a lot. And he's done loads and loads of TV stuff, loads. I mean, there's tons of it.
Right.
What made it look the way it did? I suppose, well, most of these network crime shows at this time were actually shot on 35mm film, believe it or not. They used a Panavision Panflex camera at the time. So these early 80s one, they predate video. So these weren't shot on video like that. So they're all shot on kind of on a very, sometimes 16mm film, but film generally, which was kind of the gold standard at that time. And because they're shot on film, it gives them a flexibility for how they can do handheld and tripod work, I suppose. And also they can run them on dollies. They're basically the same cameras you're going to use for films. So you can use all of the same technology that you use for films. And that means that they also have great depth, even under low lighting, which is what plays in TJ Hooker's strengths and it's what plays in Hunter's strengths. So all of the scenes here are probably lit with tungsten balanced lighting kits, which is common for that time, where to create the really big illuminated shadows, you need really bright lights, even in the daytime, believe it or not, to get that kind of it's almost like a semi-noir feel to the shots. And a case in point here is the opening sequence of the murder, which is shot completely in the dark. The illumination from the bar is all in kind of a red and yellowy haze in the back. It's very active in the bar. The bar's kind of lit for that. When she comes out, you're in that kind of nighttime territory. It's kind of lit quite well. And the nighttime scenes work particularly well in Hunter, such as they are. They're just not very good when you're close up with characters like Hunter. Every other character... So, two things, actually. The main characters don't come out of this very well in terms of the way they're lit at all throughout.
No.
And the only exception to that is the close-ups and the interesting sequences of the killer when he's stalking people and those sequences. So those are all done in the kind of the creepy guy behind them. Oh no, she dropped her keys kind of vibe. But it kind of works. Yeah. It kind of works. The characters, though, because they're so one-dimensional, they're often lit one-dimensionally. So there's no depth to anything. So when you see that Hunter and Dee Dee in any scene, yes, the backdrop is Los Angeles, and it's lit quite well for Los Angeles. Even in the day, the scene is lit well, but they are not illuminated in it. They are just flat. And since their performance is flat, and they're basically caricatures anyway, it gives them no sense of place. And that ties into the key problem with this entire show, that you've got really essentially a guy that's shot, lots of TV shows, a director that made, was basically utilizing mean streets. And so you end up with the scenes in the nighttime of everything else but the main actors looking pretty good. Then you go to the sequences where you're inside locations like the hospital later on, or inside the houses, or inside any of the scenes of the crime. And they're all lit completely flat. They're just 3-point. There's no real depth. There's nothing interesting. They don't look like crime scenes. There's no care taken over the mise-en-scène. There's just a body on the floor, and as he lifts it up, there's this brutally murdered woman, but there's no blood anywhere or anything like that, considering she was murdered at the doorstep and he must have moved the body to the lounge where it was later found. Would imply that she either struggled and died in there and there'd be blood everywhere. It's not quite clear, but there's no signs of a struggle. She just laid down and died, and then they put a sheet over her. Now, I'm not saying that there should be that. What I'm saying is that because of the way that the film they've taken the main thematic and their inspiration from, you need to have that. You take that away and you light everything flat, then you end up with something that looks completely vanilla. And that's the key problem here. So as much as I like the camera work itself, the way it's shot, sometimes the sequences, and there's a lot of guns pointing at cameras in this and low angle guns to make it all, all superpower. And there's a lot of that. Lots of camera pointing directly at two cops pointing their guns, and somebody in there, the next shot, you'll see somebody getting shot and they fly backwards. There's lots of that in this. Shot, reverse shot for guns. So gunshot, reverse shot, really, I suppose. So there's quite a bit of that. And of course, you've got those spectacular stunts in this. I'll come to the stunts in a minute, but you've got the way they're illuminated. The action is lit well. The city is lit well. The actors are all boringly lit. It's lit, apart from the murderer. And even when they're interrogating people, it's not lit particularly well. Even when they're going and they go towards the final scene where Brian Dennehy's character is going to murder his psychiatrist for no reason whatsoever on a Tuesday, counter to type. Even then, it's just lit completely flat. There's no suspense. There's no drama. And then when they go into the room and it's Dee Dee, it's no surprise that it's her. It's just completely and utterly, it could have been done in such a better way. Contrast that to the sequence where Dee Dee is being stalked and she's frightened that the killer's broken in, and then there's the dark doorway. She's looking on the stairs. It's really dark. You're looking outside. You're looking up and you see the sort of light from the window. That is clearly where the strength of the director and the cinematographer lie in those parts. The illumination of murders. Everything else, the investigation, is just lit so bland and so boring, and the cameras and the characters look so uninteresting. Now, there are some handheld camera scenes in this, car chases, of course, things like that. But apparently it was all done quite deliberately shaky, and I guess that's because it's basically the same mechanism and technology used for Dirty Harry and Streets of San Francisco. And the one thing they'd gotten good at in the time between the 70s and the 80s was chases in cars in the US. They had that down as a standard formula. And they use the, as you pointed out, actually, they use the camera mounts on vehicles and dolly tracks for those kind of interior driving shots. So you get the kind of location. So at least it's the back. It's not that horrible rear screen projection where you see the sort of backgrounds wobbling around or anything like that. It is actually LA in the background here. And there's some, crane shots here and there, a little bit, fancy, but only driven around the stunts. There's meant to be hints of a kind of voyeurism about this. It only happens when you're from looking at the murderer's perspective. There's no other really shape of that. But there's also no camera-driven desire of any characters. So Hunter doesn't look at women in this as anything other than perfunctory, nothing, superfluous characters, including Dee Dee. And she's not lit for anything. Sometimes these characters are sexualized. I mean, throughout season 2 of TJ Hooker, you've got Heather Locklear, for goodness sake. So
yeah, true.
And here, of course, so no one's lit for their sexiness, apart from the women who were murdered at the beginning. They were kind of illuminated with the short skirts on and very flattering lighting and so on and so forth. So the murders look great, but everything else looks flat. The stunts wise, over the top, crazy, stupid, A-Team style. They don't have any sense of place in here. They're clearly thrown in here to keep the A-Team audience involved because they have no place in this. There's no point does Dirty Harry cause anyone to do a spinning kind of crash into a building or flip a car over. It just doesn't happen that way. No, the most daring stunt in that really is where he jumps on the top of a bus from a bridge and hangs on it while he's been driven around by crazy. So, and then of course you've got the gunfights in here with the various squibs that are but not attached to any people. They're just attached to inanimate objects. It seems overly loud and stuff like that. So, in terms of its stunts, the stunts are good, but there's probably more belong in an A-Team. In terms of its cinematography, it's really nicely lit in certain scenes, but it's not consistent. And it's certainly not very well lit in the day, even though they've got perfect opportunity to do that. So I think it's visually, again, completely at odds with its inspiration because it cannot be what it wanted to be, which is a Dirty Harry TV show. It can't be that. And you have to fill it with the TV stuff because that's what TV audiences demand. It can't be any of the things that it wants to be. And so for that reason, as much as I really liked it, I gave it a 6 because of the sequences that were good, but I couldn't get any further in that. What about you?
Yeah, okay. I thought this all looked very flat, and I picked up on that as well, and that's not a good thing. And I've written the same thing when you're trying to ape the tropes of the films that have this plot. When you're trying to look at them, I can't remember any moments that made me think there was a good shot. I was watching it and then thinking back and go, was there anything? Yeah, maybe that sequence where Dee Dee's getting stalked, something that might be. But like the bit where they go to the guy's house, there's nothing interesting in the way that's shot or anything. When they go walking around the big mansion to sort of break in and finding stuff. I don't know. The last shot made me really laugh at the off-market Dirty Harry line. The off-brand Dirty Harry line. I can't remember what that line was, but I was like, oh God, what's this? When he looks up and there's the pair of them shoot with the guns down, you're thinking, oh, there you go, that's the hook shot, but no, it didn't work. The death of the killer had me laughing for ages. Like I said, the purposeful dive of the building. I guess that counts as some stunt work, someone jumping off a building. Okay, fair enough. The car stunts, as you've noted, they're good. They're great. If they're in the A-Team, they're from a completely different show. In fact, I would argue that the whole preamble of this, the bank sequence, the bit where he finds Dee Dee being an undercover prostitute, they feel like from a different program. And so they're lit differently. There's no continuity. There's no cohesion to this whole thing. And when you get into the main plot, it's all really bland and dull, and it can't be what it wants to be. And that sort of comes through in how it's lit and shot because it's got no identity of its own because it's trying to crib from other things all the time. It doesn't have a thing that it wants to be. Or it does have a thing that it wants to be, but it can't be, so it can't do it. I found it bland and dull. I didn't think much to it personally, and I gave it a 5.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, I think it's not a great result, is it, for it, really?
No, it's not.
So again, I think TJ Hooker coming out quite heavily on top there, really. Eee.
Yeah.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. What will Dee Dee be saying?
I don't know. She'll be wondering why he was being told a story about a dog snorting cocaine or something.
Well, while we debate and wonder what that story was even there for, we will then leave our cinematography and then move on to our final category, which is, of course, the reception and influence. So, Adrian, TJ Hooker, influential?
I don't know. I mean, it ran for 5 seasons all told. And watching this opening episode, because I could not remember this opening episode. I remember bits from the show, and I remember watching at the time. I don't even know if we ever got this. With a lot of these kind of serial shows from the States, we didn't always get entire series. We got bits of them. They were shown at odd times, and they were shown out of order sometimes. So I don't know. I didn't see this, so I hadn't seen it before. So when I started watching it and understanding the show is about recruits that are fresh on the streets, if we're talking like influence, then you can't help but feel that this must have been a huge influence on the Police Academy films. I mean, I was watching it. I messaged you at the beginning when we started to watch it. And I was like, good Lord, this is the Police Academy.
Without a doubt.
The characters in this feel like prototypes for those in the films. The role of Hooker feels very similar to someone like Harris in the first one. You've got the different types. I mean, obviously, Police Academy's played it more for laughs, but you can swap in and out as Med for what's his face, Steve Guttenberg, and things like that. You can swap these in and out, and you could see, oh, right, they've just done that. And so I think that is obviously an influence. Now, whether it's a good influence, because it gave us the Police Academy films, is another question. But the first one's actually all right, and there's obviously some funny bits in the second one. But I think it also helped, in terms of sort of influence, it made William Shatner get out from under the role of Kirk to some degree.
A bit.
Because there's a story on IMDb where he's being interviewed on the Irish television programme The Late Late Show, and it says that when he was first filming this series, autograph hunters were asking him why Captain Kirk was dressed as a policeman, and then once it began to air, they insisted he sign their autographs as T.J. Hooker, and Shatner stated this brought home to him the power television could wield over its influence, which is quite interesting because he was Captain Kirk for so many people for so long. I mean, obviously all the way from the 60s when they brought it back for the films. And there's a cartoon as well. So he was that person. And then this allowed him to be something else. So in terms of influence, this changed what he was seen as. He gave him a different role. And maybe, made him, brought him out from being typecast as Captain Kirk, he still probably is, allowing him to do stuff like Boston Legal down the line, which is considered quite influential and stuff like that. I don't know. And I also wonder if this was part of a movement in things like, which I think Hunter doesn't really do, but to move away from fantasy cops. Like I said, this comes out the same year as Cagney and Lacey. Okay. And this kind of shows that we saw around the time, making feel a bit more grounded and a bit more like addressing things of the time, in trying to be in a bit more of a, I don't know, the rest of the show may go off the rails. I don't know. And it very well may do. But at this point in this pilot, it kind of feels more grounded. And, the use of relocation, small-time crooks, as I mentioned, not stupid planes like in Blue Thunder, characters that have suffered trauma in Vietnam, and also trying to say something about the US at the time. Remember, around this time, did we get things like the Killing of America and things like that? Which was sort of, and this notion,
that
like you said,
it's got to be around this time, yeah.
And we had the notion of, like you said, the FBI. We had the rise of serial killers and this kind of, common crime where crime was just becoming this thing where people were just being killed. It wasn't, things were changing, and the summer of, obviously the summer of love from the 60s was well over, and the 70s brought in all these serial killers and things like that. And maybe this, him, Shatner's character, sort of talking about that, gives this kind of some kind of influence over, that sort of look at how America and the US changed. So there is that kind of bit of that examination of that here, maybe. So there may be influence in that and other shows, films, TV stuff that do that. And this is part of that movement, I think. So I don't know. I don't know if it was massively influential, but it's doing something. In terms of reception, it got 5 seasons. There's an entry on IMDb for T.J. Hooker the movie, which is under production. I think it's well remembered. I think if you mention T.J. Hooker to a lot of people, they will remember it. So I don't think it's got forgotten about. I gave it a 6 because I think it's part of watching it now, it feels part of a change in how cop shows. I mean, don't forget, Thingy was around this time as well. Hill Street Blues. That was another big one, sort of in the change. And whilst this was more action based than that was, that was, this was in on that, I think, trying to sort of ground cops into a real world, which I think, whilst this doesn't do it on its own, does, lead into other things. So yeah, I gave it a 6. I think it's all right. What about you?
I think it lasted for 5 seasons. Obviously, the last season was on a different network because it was kind of saved from. And I think there's a few reasons why it kind of died off. So it was I suppose, like you say, it was to show Shatner had different dimensions to him. But actually, I think it didn't help. And also, of course, he was still very much, even though he maybe wanted to try and branch away from the Captain Kirk, he then went on to make another 7 movies as Captain Kirk.
Yeah, true.
So okay, I think he tried, and I think in reality people just couldn't get away. I think people couldn't get away from him being Captain Kirk.
Probably.
But were it not for Shatner being in it, I don't think it would have lasted at any time at all. I think he's good in it. Well. And I don't think the appearance of Heather Lockyer in season 2, because she was also they're the only 2 characters in it, him he was in every episode, and she was in every episode from season 2 onwards. I don't know how long it would have lasted, but it was popular enough. I think it was actually killed by a couple of things. I think, firstly, there was a tide turned on these kind of shows on TV just pretty quickly, because some were really popular, and the really popular ones became really popular. The Cagney and Lacey's and things like that. They were super popular, won loads of awards and all sorts of stuff. And plaudits. This was never going to win any awards, I don't think. I didn't see that it had won any. And also, then, of course, the Police Academy movies came along and kind of killed its serious tone dead, because it's such a close parody of TJ Hooker in almost every way. I mean, even in even the characters, there's riots in the streets, the street crime is off the chart. The guy goes on a roof.
Exactly.
He's taking pot shots at the cops. They go off on a roof and challenge him. It's the same as the pilot of TJ Hooker is the Police Academy, the first one. Yeah. Albeit with some more sort of, I guess you call it more, not American Pie, but that kind of style of comedy in it, that kind of...
TJ Hooker never gets stuck up a horse's ass.
No, that's what I mean. So, but I think that's what killed the tone, because that occurred, that was 1980, when did that Police Academy come out? 1984? And that was a succession of films as well. Police Academy was a massively popular film, clearly based on T.J. Hooker. But T.J. Hooker was never going to survive that, because after that, you're just going to be thinking it's more like a parody. Yeah. Because it lampooned it so well, I think it killed it. And then, of course, you've got Shatner in there, Shatner's bassoon territory. So, of course, he eventually just went back to playing the bassoon, didn't he? And I think it was never it never had a long-lasting influence, because it just wasn't popular enough to gain that. It was never really that popular. Its popularity lasted as long as Shatner was able to carry it off. But I think people wanted him to be Kirk, because that's who they saw him as. He was Kirk for everybody. This isn't far from, like you said, The Wrath of Khan. We've got The Search for Spock was also, remember that they shot them back to back. So I think it was just inevitable that while he was doing this, he was typecast as Captain Kirk. And I think that stuck with him. And clearly has, because he's been Captain Kirk ever since. Mm-hmm. So I rated the reception and influence, because I don't see it as having any really, as a 5 for...
That's fair enough.
TJ Hooker. And so, let's turn to our final thing with Hunter then, really, which is, again, its reception influence. Now, this one actually ran from 1984 to 1991. 7 series this had.
Incredible.
So, and there's 170 something episodes of this.
Incredible.
So even after that, believe it or not, 4 years after the original series ended, there was a reunion NBC TV movie called The Return of Hunter, Everybody Walks in LA, that had Dreyer and Charles Hallahan this time, because Charles Hallahan isn't a character that's in the pilot, but he's in all of the other episodes afterwards. And by the way, Charles Hallahan is the guy that gets, I'm sure it's the guy out of The Thing whose head grows its own legs. I think it's that guy.
I think so.
Anyway, but he's obviously in the reprise ones, and Hunter gets promoted in that to lieutenant, by the way, and that came out like a few years later. Then there was a movie that it was like a Dirty Harry again type idea. A psycho wants fame, wants the attention. It's basically robbing the plot of Dirty Harry all over again. So it's just like they can't create an identity for him. Eventually, he becomes obsessed with Hunter in that particular one. Stephanie Crane wasn't in it at the time because she was pregnant, so she didn't reprise the role as Dee Dee McCall, but that also had Barry Bostwick, Miguel Ferrer, and John C. McGinley in it. So some names. 7 years later, in November 2002, 11 years after the original series ended, the reunion TV movie Hunter Return to Justice made its premiere to really strong ratings. This time, Stephanie Kramer returned as her role as Dee Dee, and the show's setting switched from Los Angeles to San Diego as Hunter's current LA partner is killed in the line of duty. It's Enforcer. So they've just robbed another Dirty Harry film. Given the success of that movie, Cannell, Dreyer and NBC attempted to bring back Hunter as a regular series. In April 2003, an airing of another TV movie, Hunter Back in Force, served as the pilot for the new series. So we could have done a Battle of the Pilots with another pilot. The network decided to broadcast 3 new 1-hour episodes of Hunter, one called Vaya Sin Dios, one called Untouchable, and one called Dead Heat. Another 2 episodes were filmed, originally 5 episodes of the year, but never shown in the US as NBC decided to cancel the new series. Fred Dreyer later cited creative difficulties and budget constraints as the reason for the revival's unexpected end. The show was syndicated globally, internationally. It was on everywhere and across the world, right up until the late noughties. In the UK, it was on for 2 years, and the first 2 seasons aired on ITV. The remainder, however, were all shown on Sky TV in the UK. So that's when they started buying popular things off the terrestrial channels. Okay. Now, influence, none. People remember it Was it influential? No, because Dirty Harry was influential. This is something that was influenced, but it's not. It wasn't. It was influenced, and its creation was heavily influenced and based on something completely different. Did this influence any other shows? None in the slightest. None. I say none. One.
Yeah.
And that's a comedy show that came out. I don't know if it was around the same time. Probably not too far off. I didn't check into the dates, but that was a TV show, a comedy spoof of this exact show called Sledgehammer. In that, you've got the cop, gun-toting super cop in the mold of Rick Hunter called Sledgehammer. All of the other cliche characters there. His female sidekick is called. It's not Dee Dee in that one. It's Dory Doro. So Dee Dee and Dory Doro. So you can see it's plain as the nose. It's basically a pastiche of this show, which is interesting because it's actually better. It's better than Hunter in every way. 1986.
Sledgehammer came out.
So 2 years later, midway through, this is probably its second or third season. Sledgehammer comes out and really takes the mickey out of this show to the point when it's actually such a brilliant parody. It's preferable.
Yeah, way
it's
more preferable.
way funnier. It's way more on point, and it's a much better pastiche of Dirty Harry than Hunter is, directly because it's not doing it seriously. And so they're able then to tackle really stupid things with a character like Dirty Harry, which works so much better than trying to do it seriously and not being able to. So you get that. And of course, then you've got cop shows like... there is a mold for cop shows where you have a taller, gun-toting kind of cop and his sidekick female compadre. I mean, we have Dapesy and Makepeace in the UK, and there's a few others, but I think they're not necessarily leaning into this as its influence. There's other shows that were influenced, and I don't think this one would really plant itself there. You've got other shows, I think things like Heart to Heart, probably actually way before
Scarecrow,
any of that.
Mrs. King.
Scarecrow, there's a bunch. So as much as this had a series of mini-movies made and the show extended its life way beyond its capabilities, I think that's because by this point, by mid-80s, the Dirty Harry movies had stopped. And for whatever reason, people did really like the Dirty Harry characters, even though he was horrible, generally, and the films were pretty grubby and brutal. People quite liked this wisecracking, because by the time it got to the end of the Dirty Harry franchise, he was just cracking one-liners all the time, famous for his one-liners. And so because it became that, people liked it for that. And then, so this TV show becomes more of a pastiche of him impersonating Clint Eastwood doing these kind of one-liners. Not like works for me, because he kind of dropped that halfway through the seasons, but he just starts to impersonate Clint Eastwood. However, the better impersonation and the funniest show was Sledgehammer by miles, which is quite interesting. So did this have an influence? No. Did it create another show which was better? Yes. So I suppose you can at least give it that.
Yeah.
Was this a particularly well-received show? It was popular. Inexplicably popular. But I think that's the thirst for Dirty Harry type characters, because people like that, but not for that show. Because I don't think, later, by the way, it was heavily criticized for its violence when it came out, and so much so they toned it right down. So midway through the first season, the entire thematic of it gets toned down even more, and I think it turns into more of a show that is aligned to the theme tune than a Dirty Harry pastiche per se, until it comes out years later, and then the TV movies are more like the Dirty Harry again. Because I think they've got TV movie budget and they've got a little bit more production. And so they're able to perhaps approach the subject matter in less of a TV-friendly way. So all in all, what does it add up to? Well, I actually gave it 7 for its reception influence, but I'm thinking that's probably a bit high. So I'm going to go for a 6. And that's principally because we wouldn't have Sledgehammer if we wanted for this show. And Sledgehammer was amazing. And also, rightly or wrongly, it did actually have quite a long shelf life. I mean, it isn't my thing, but clearly a lot of people liked it. And maybe trying to keep the Dirty Harry thing alive wasn't such a bad thing, but since it was kind of given up on, and the later films, of course, were rubbish. So maybe there is something in that by keeping these TV movies going, but they're not very good. And its rebirth, such as it was, the 3 episodes of the 5 they made didn't go anywhere. So I think by the time it got to the 2000s, we were done with Hunter. And so I'll drop it to a 6. I think 6 is more than adequate. But what about you?
Yeah, its reception is inexplicable to me. If I'm perfectly honest, there were, I don't know whether there was a lack of decent stuff in 1984 that allowed this to gain its hooks into people and get it going. I don't know. But I just don't get it, because as you've rightly said, and this is exactly what I've written, it's too much of a rip-off to be influential, because the thing it is ripping off, Dirty Harry, is the influential thing.
Yeah, very much so.
So you can't be influential if all you're doing is doing the thing that's already been done. And okay, like you said, I've written the same. I get it. I guess it led to Sledgehammer, but that's the cycle, isn't it? We see that in everything. Original, knockoff, pastiche.
Yeah.
If you think about, you Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scary Movie. there's three. You get the one that comes up to do something new. You get all the knockoffs, and then you get the piss take, and then the story loops back, and that's what happened here. And this is just in the middle. It's part of but it's a long drawn out middle. I don't know what else was doing. Was there other Dirty Harry style stuff? I don't know. Well, this is getting towards the end of that because this is 84. Dirty Harry was what, 71, 72?
Yeah, 71.
71, yeah. It's older than me, God. So this is just the middle part of the cycle. So I can't say it's influential because it's influenced. And I can't believe they tried to bring it back twice. It's like, stop it. It's too formulaic and hackneyed. It's just, it is what it is. If they tried to change it up as it went along, okay, fair enough. But then it's no longer this pilot, I think. So I don't know. I gave it a 5 based on the fact that for some reason it was received well. I don't understand because I didn't like it. I didn't like the show. I thought it wasn't very good, but I'll give it a 5 because it had a long shelf life. But influence, none. Nothing at all.
Okay, well, there we have it. The final category is in, the final scores are in. I'm looking at the calculations, and it's a fairly resounding 60 points to our friend TJ Hooker and a measly 50 points overall to Hunter. So I would call that a bit of a trouncing, really.
Bit of a beating, yeah.
All that police training he was doing, all that running and jumping and squatting down and shooting clearly paid off because it absolutely kicked the balls of Hunter, didn't it? And I suppose we can sort of look back and think, actually, yes, at least TJ Hooker was an original idea. Clearly so original, but it got ripped off by another film series. And what Hunter was ripping off a film series and not doing a very great job at that more often than not, but somehow managed to drag that over 6-7 seasons and 5 movies. I don't know how that happens, but we just did.
I don't know. I've no idea.
So I declare the winner then. The winner is TJ Hooker. Well done, William. Well done, Mr. Shatner. Well done, Mr. Shatner. Well done. He's very pleased. We nearly got through the whole thing. And I don't know why he would say it like that, because if he's referring to himself in the third person, but it doesn't matter,
does it? I'd just like to say that I'm very pleased to win this award.
That's pretty good, actually. I'm quite impressed. That's not a bad Shatner, that. Now try doing Hunter. Works for me. Didn't know, did it? At all.
This doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for me at all. No, it doesn't work for you. That was the problem, Hunter.
Yeah,
you great
it
big
was.
ex-football playing idiot.
That's such a stupid catchphrase as well. It's
it doesn't actually last that long. They try it for most of the first season. I think it's lost by the second season because just like nobody was buying that.
No. Just rubbish.
And of course, in Sledgehammer, he talks to his gun, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah. Sledgehammer's way better. If you want to watch this kind of thing, watch Sledgehammer. You rightly say, it's the pastiche of Dirty Harry, and it works far better.
In fact,
way better.
I would suggest that you not only watch Sledgehammer and but particularly find the episode with the Elvis impersonators, because it is absolutely brilliant. Now, I watched that not that long ago, and when he spins the microphone around and smacks the guy in the mouth, it made me laugh a lot. So go and watch that. All the episodes, that one in particular, when Sledgehammer does his Elvis impersonation, is genuine TV gold. So, and it's not often you can say that about some of those kind of shows, because it's such a good pastiche. It's even lit the same as those shows. It's so good. So yeah, go and watch that. Don't watch Hunter. Maybe go and explore a bit of TJ Hooker. Give William Shatner a bit of a pat on the back. For goodness sake, he's in that tight suit for a reason. Cut off the blood supply to his neck. I'm pretty sure of it.
And you get to see Adrian's med in his pants.
You certainly will do that.
Works for me.
Any final thoughts before we leave Zmed to his dancy pants?
No, I was like I said, I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought Hunter was going to be better, and I thought TJ Hooker was going to be worse. So it's a role reversal here. And I remember TJ Hooker being a bit corny stuff, and I think at the time, but I think actually revisiting it now, it's actually quite an interesting. It's an interesting take on the sort of cop genre. Doing it from a sort of training point of view by being in sort of raw recruits, I think is quite an interesting angle. And Hunter, unfortunately, just desperately wants to be Dirty Harry, but as you've said, it's more like Grubby Barry. It's just not. It's just it's not anything, is it? And I think
no.
Yeah. So that's my final thoughts on this.
No, and I would share those. All that remains is for me to say thank you for listening. And please do go, if you really are interested, You can go and find both of those pilot shows like we did. They're on YouTube in their fullest. In fact, the entire series is on YouTube if you really want to go for it. So go and fill your boots with them. I'd strongly recommend you've got TJ Hooker, probably less so Hunter, unless you want a good laugh. But go and seek them out if that's what you want to do, if we've inspired you to do that. And of course, we can always say at this point as well, we do have another podcast, of course, that is Zapped to the Past, where we review Commodore 64 games using the magazine Zap 64 as the basis for those. And we're now up to episode 186 of that. And we have covered 75 or 76 issues of nearly of the magazine.
Yeah, 75, I think.
So, and you can find that on zappedtothepast.com, which is where you'll find the website with all of the episodes. But you can also, of course, go to Podbean and Apple Podcasts and all the various pod places. And there, if you look for Zapped to the Past, you'll find us. If you Google it, you're going to find us. You can email us, zappedtothepast@gmail.com. You can go to our shop, which is zappedtothepast.shop, and buy yourself a mug and a poster if you want to do that. They're all there, not that expensive, and you get special options on those if you become a patron of Zapped to the Past, which you can do by going to patreon.com/Zapped to the Past. And as we often say, for little more than the price of a sandwich, probably for little more than the price of a DVD these days as well. If you even have DVDs anymore, you might find some of these TV shows on DVD. You never know.
You might.
A lot of them are released on that. And so we can also get us a coffee on kofi.com/Zapped to the Past, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And all of those places where, we're not begging for cash, but it's nice if you show an interest and you think we're doing a good job. It's always nice to receive things like that. It helps us keep the lights on and pay for stuff. We're not selfish. We don't use it to fund our lavish lifestyles, and Adrian doesn't swim in Coca-Cola every night.
Not anymore.
We have to sit watching old TV shows on YouTube to get our giggles.
We do.
But we do this because, we have a passion for what we do. And if you think that deserves a reward, even if it's just a pat on the back or a review on some of the various review places and say that we're great and fabulous, then we love that. We're also on all the social media feeds, but you can go on social media and find us on there. There's conversations. But if you really want to talk to us, join the Patreon. You'll be on our Discord, which is a Patreon-only exclusive, and you can chat to a load of our amazing fans on there as well as us. We're there regularly. And, of course, you get exclusive downloads, ad-free downloads, and loads of other good stuff that none of the non-Patreons get any of that. So if you're really interested, go and, shop for that. Look us up. We're on Google. You can't miss us. 186 episodes tells us that we're out there somewhere. But that said, all that remains for me to say at the end of this is I haven't been TJ Hooker. I have been Graham Raddings.
And I have been Adrian's Med.
And Adrian has spent this entire episode in his budgie smugglers, and they are monogrammed.
They are. They're getting a bit tight at the moment, sort of thing, and they're working their way up.
And on that bombshell, it's time to leave. Goodbye, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu to you and you.
Works for me.
Thank you kindly for listening to the Battle of the Pilots podcast, brought to you by the team behind Zapped to the Past. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this feisty look and comedic dive, indeed an out-and-out dust-up, between two classic pilot episodes that have graced our TV screens from over the last 50 years. We will, of course, return with another exciting and no doubt challenging episode. Until then, you can download this podcast and others from the zappedtothepast.com website, as well as listen on all good podcasting apps such as Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, Player FM, and, well, those kind of things. The Battle of the Pilots podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings and recorded at Flaky Bits 2.0 studio. And please do remember, all opinions expressed throughout the podcast are those of the writers. Now, go and watch something new on TV. You never know. It could be the start of something brilliant.